The wind forgets to blow, and even immortality yawns from time to time. If your eyes are tired and your thoughts are heavy, then pause here, breathe deeply, and let go of the day behind you. On this quiet evening atop Mount Olympus, the home of the ancient Greek gods, not much stirs. The sun has dipped behind a gauzy veil of clouds, casting a hazy golden-pink light over the alabaster columns and polished marble floors. Everything seems bathed in a warm glow, as if even time has been kissed by sleep. The mighty throne room, usually echoing with divine debates and declarations, now rests in silence. Zeus, king of the gods, sits not with thunderbolt in hand, but with a scroll half read on his lap, his eyes drifting shut as a gentle breeze plays with his long white beard. Nearby, Hera long welcome to a soft and slow journey through a realm of gods and clouds, whereas with a sleepy hound curled at her feet, her expression soft, not proud nor fierce as tales might tell, but quiet, contemplative. Around the courtyard, other gods idle in a rare moment of peace. Apollo plucks lazily at his lyre, letting the notes drift like feathers on the breeze. Artemis, leaning against a sun-warmed wall, sharpens her arrows more out of habit than need, her gaze not focused on anything in particular. Dionysus, never far from a goblet, sips slowly, not to celebrate but simply to pass the time. Ares, unusually calm, sits on a bench of stone, watching the clouds change shape with a disinterested eye. Hephaestus's forge is cool for once, tools set aside, his great arms folded as he dozes near a wall, soot still on his cheeks but the heat of fire absent. In the kitchen, a lesser-known corner of Olympus, Demeter oversees a simmering pot. Though no one is especially hungry, she stirs gently, the steam mixing with the fragrant mountain air. The Muses sit in a shaded corner, murmuring quiet verses to one another like lullabies, their voices rising and falling like soft waves. Even Hermes, the restless messenger, lies in a hammock strung between two olive trees, his winged sandals removed and tucked beside him. There is no urgency tonight. No messages, no quarrels, no destinies to guide. Just the slow, rhythmic exhale of a realm that has, for now, nothing to do. Above them all, the stars begin to prick through the sky, like pinholes in soft velvet, revealing a quiet galaxy that shines not brightly but gently, perfect for dreaming. The air is filled with the muted scent of laurel and lavender, and every stone, every branch, every being seems to hum with a drowsy, ancient stillness. Even the owls that perch on the rooftop balustrades do not hoot, but blink slowly, their round eyes heavy with shared quiet. And so the evening drifts on, not in scenes of grandeur, not in thrilling feats, but in soft murmurs and long silences, where even gods, timeless and powerful, find themselves surrendering to a pause. A calm, endless pause atop a mountain where stories wait, but only after sleep. As the soft night deepens on Mount Olympus, the glow that had once kissed the columns with warm gold fades into a subdued silver, the kind that feels less like light and more like a whisper brushed across stone. The sky, now cloaked in a sleepy, blue-black, gently cradles the stars which flicker not in celebration, but as if they too were sighing softly through their celestial watch. Within the heart of the mountain's divine palace, the movement of time itself seems to stall. Down a wide corridor lined with tall fluted pillars and draped in thick velvet curtains, Athena walks slowly, her sandals quiet against the marble, her owl companion perched atop her shoulder, dozing with a single eye open. Her shield is left, behind in her chamber, propped in a corner like an unused thought. There is no war to plan tonight, no mortal heroes to guide. Only the hush of reflection and the company of stillness. She passes by a window where soft moonlight pools on the floor and pauses to watch a lone cloud drifting far below the mountain's peak, its slow pace echoing the unhurried pulse of the realm around her. Inside the adjoining chamber, Hestia tends to a flame that doesn't need tending. The hearth goddess kneels slowly, not to ignite, but simply to observe the gentle sway of embers in the temple's eternal fire. It doesn't crackle or roar, it flickers in slow motion, emitting warmth that isn't hot, a calm presence more than a light source. She hums something ancient, a melody known only to the gods, too old and too soft to remember, and yet comforting in its vagueness. In a nearby grove behind the palace where the olive trees bend gently as though nodding off, Persephone walks barefoot across the cool grass. Her gown trails behind her like spilled starlight, and her fingers brush the leaves absent-mindedly. It is not spring and it is not autumn. Seasons, like everything else here, are suspended in a tranquil pause. The underworld's queen is in no rush to return, and Olympus is in no rush to awaken. She passes a pond where frogs don't croak and water doesn't ripple, only reflect. A mirror of quiet. Farther along the same winding path, a faint rustle comes from a bench where Aphrodite reclines, her golden hair cascading down like liquid silk. She watches nothing in particular, her thoughts not of passion or longing, but of the sound of stillness. How rare, even in immortality, it is to simply be. Her doves nest quietly nearby, their wings tucked, their usual cooing hushed as though the night had asked them kindly to rest. Above, on a quiet balcony ringed with ivy, Poseidon stands with arms folded, gazing not out at his oceans, though they swirl far in the distance, but up toward the sky, watching stars he had not noticed in centuries. His trident leans against the balustrade, ignored. The sea stirs as it always does, but tonight even its waves seem to roll in dreams. He does not speak. He does not need to. Below, in the silent hall of fate, the Moirai, the fates, have set, their spindle aside. The golden thread lies coiled like a sleeping snake on the stone table, untouched. Clotho dozes with her cheek on her hand, Lachesis' eyes are half-lidded, and even Atropos has allowed her shears to rest in her lap. Destiny, for once, can wait. The entire mountain exhales in perfect unison, as though Olympus itself were alive and had finally remembered how to sleep. A thin layer of mist begins to drift lazily between the colonnades and gardens, not thick enough to obscure, just enough to soften the edges of things. The air is not cold, not warm, simply present. Perfect nothingness that wraps itself around each branch, each statue, each god, and as the second hour of night arrives, it brings not dreams of greatness or tales of tragedy, but a continuing stillness where thoughts quiet, and every divine being simply exists, unbothered, undisturbed, and entirely at peace atop a world that for now asks nothing of them at all. Deeper into the night, as the silence on Mount Olympus grows even more profound, a sense of weightlessness blankets the entire divine realm, a kind of sacred pause where even the breeze seems hesitant to stir. The gods, usually so entangled in the affairs of mortals and myths, now dwell in the gentle rhythm of quiet. Somewhere along the east-facing portico, long columns stretch up toward the sky, their shadows stretching even farther across the marble floor, where Artemis has found a rare moment to rest. She lies on her back, arms folded beneath her head, gazing at the canopy of stars above, not as a huntress tracking celestial prey, but simply as a being admiring a sky she has always known. Her bow rests beside her, silent and unused, and the silver moonlight filters gently through the gaps in the roof, illuminating her face in slow pulses. An owl lands silently on the balustrade nearby, offering her a blink before tucking its head under its wing. Not far from her, Apollo, her twin, sits cross-legged on a bench of rose marble, a slow melody drifting from his lyre, each note so faint and distant it feels more like memory than music. He hums under his breath, not to perform, not to impress, but to keep his fingers moving, gently echoing the sleeping tone of Olympus itself. The notes fall like raindrops on leaves, barely disturbing the air. Behind them, in one of the palace's enclosed gardens, vines creep lazily up statues, their tendrils curling slowly, as if even growth has adopted a pace suited to dreaming. Dionysus has chosen this quiet grove for his evening nap, nestled in, a soft heap of cushions and woven blankets, a nearly empty goblet resting in his palm and a grapevine curling around his ankle like a cat. His laughter, so often wild and unchecked, has been replaced with a soft sigh as he drifts further into half-sleep. Around him, Panpipes lie discarded, and wine jugs rest untouched, their contents still and cool in the shadow of a fig tree. Beyond, the garden wall, a hallway lit with floating orbs of gentle gold leads toward the Hall of Echoes, a place where voices of the past used to linger, recounting tales of heroism, heartbreak, and hubris. But tonight, even the echoes sleep. The walls, usually murmuring with the memories of countless myths, now absorb all sound, offering only a deep, restful silence in return. Hermes, who often flits down this corridor with his winged sandals and clever grin, walks barefoot now, slowly, trailing his fingers along the wall as if to feel the quiet. He wears no cloak, carries no scrolls, and bears no news. Instead, he simply moves, not toward anything but within a space that allows him, for once, to just wander without purpose. His steps make no sound on the polished floor, and when he reaches a wide balcony overlooking the mortal realm, he simply leans against the railing, eyes half-lidded, watching distant lightning flicker softly on the horizon of the world far below. The gods rarely look down during such moments. Olympus is not interested in humanity tonight. In another quiet room lit by the dim glow of ever-burning lamps, Hephaestus sits at his work table, not working. His tools are arranged neatly in rows, untouched for hours, and his calloused hands rest on his lap. He studies a half-finished golden sculpture of a bird that will not fly and does not need to. It is beautiful in its incompleteness, and tonight, that is enough. From across the chamber, Aphrodite enters without speaking, and for a long time they simply sit together in the warm glow of the forge, saying nothing, needing nothing. Even the sound of the flame is soft and steady, no longer roaring, but pulsing like a gentle heartbeat. Outside, a soft mist begins to gather along the edges of the mountaintop, curling around the statues of forgotten nymphs and long-retired heroes. It weaves between their feet like silk, as though Olympus is tucking itself in for the night. And, through this deep, untroubled silence, the entire mountain becomes something closer to a lullaby, a place where power sleeps and stories pause, and where even gods are allowed to exhale into the stillness of eternity. The night on Mount Olympus lingers softly, stretching its calm fingers across every temple, courtyard, and hall like a velvet shroud gently tucking in a restless child. As if in quiet agreement, no god stirs with urgency, and the great palace, usually humming with divine energy, is subdued in a rare moment of pure stillness. Inside the Hall of Seasons, Demeter sits on a cushioned bench beneath a blooming laurel tree that never wilts, her fingers slowly shelling pomegranate seeds one by one. She doesn't eat them, only holds them, watching their glossy skins reflect the flickering lantern light. Persephone sits nearby on the stone floor, legs crossed, her head leaned against her mother's knee in a posture of peace that no epic ever bothered to record. The two speak little, exchanging soft glances more than words, and as a breeze filters through the open archways, carrying the scent of olive trees and baked earth, it brushes their hair, but carries no news, no reminders, no timelines. Outside, the stars have begun their slow arc across the heavens, tracing the same path they have since before the myths began. And yet tonight they move not with purpose, but with drowsy hesitation, as if unsure whether they are needed at all. Along the outer terraces, ivy grows deliberately across the balustrades, its leaves thick with dew and motionless in the windless air. A fountain flows softly at the center of the atrium, its gentle trickle now the loudest sound in Olympus, which says more about the silence than the fountain. Nearby, Athena returns to her study where scrolls are stacked in neat rows, each one a tale of mortal philosophy or divine judgment. But she doesn't read. She picks up a parchment, skims it with half-focused eyes, and sets it down again. Her mind isn't drawn to strategy or law this evening. It is simply wandering, untethered by purpose, softened by the weight of nothing pressing. Outside her doorway, Eros and Psyche sit beneath a fig tree, his wings folded behind him like blankets, hers gone entirely now, discarded since love no longer needs proof. They speak in whispers, not of passion or promises, but of dreams, pointless, quiet ones, like wondering whether stars feel lonely, or if clouds ever remember where they've been. Around the corner, in a quiet stone library where sunlight never reaches, the three Moirai continue to rest. The loom is untouched, and the golden threads droop loosely from the spindle, catching occasional dust motes that drift lazily in the lamplight. The past, present, and future, normally held in such taut alignment, hang limp, as if the timeline itself were waiting for permission to resume. And yet, nothing is wrong. Everything is exactly as it should be. Paused, peaceful, pointless in the best way possible. Down by the pools carved into the side of the mountain, Poseidon has removed his sandals and now sits with his feet submerged in water he did not create. The pool isn't sea, isn't salt, just cool and still, and he seems to enjoy that. He runs a hand across his beard thoughtfully, his trident forgotten somewhere behind him, and watches ripples expand and fade, as if tracking the passage of thought itself. Not far from him, Hera stands by a tall cypress, arms folded across her chest, her expression unreadable. She is not thinking of marriage or thrones, not weighing loyalty or power. She's merely watching. The sky, the trees, the nothing. And, in this lack of responsibility, she finds a softness rarely afforded to her. Even her peacocks, who usually strut with elegance and pride, now huddle quietly beneath a column, heads tucked, tails folded, as though the divine pageantry of their feathers can be spared until morning. A servant wind moves faintly through the halls. Not a god, not a spirit, just a hush in motion, sweeping fallen petals across the smooth floors in no rush at all. Olympus, ever radiant and aloof, now feels almost mortal in its drowsiness, like an old house lived in for too long and finally quiet enough to listen to its own breath. There are no tempests brewing, no love affairs crumbling, no monstrous births or vengeful curses unraveling in the corners of the realm. Just gods without, duties, thoughts without urgency, and a mountaintop so hushed it feels wrapped in time itself. If sleep could choose a throne, it would sit here, beside the gods, above the world where eternity slows down just enough to feel real. As the quiet night deepens and the stars settle into their slow shimmer overhead, Mount Olympus continues to rest in a rare and golden kind of stillness, one not born from exhaustion, but from a collective choice to simply do nothing. The great halls and open courtyards that usually echo with divine discourse now hold only the gentle sounds of occasional breath, the rustle of a robe shifting in sleep, or the faint chime of a hanging lantern as it sways gently in the windless dark. Down by the reflecting pool, not far from a grove of silver-leaved trees that glimmer faintly under the moonlight, Hestia sits alone with a small copper brazier beside her, the fire within flickering softly, almost lazily, casting long shadows that stretch and curl along the smooth stones. Her eyes are half-lidded, and though she watches the flame, she does not tend it. It burns because it wishes to, not because she commands it. Behind her, a single marble bench catches the cool night dew, untouched by anyone passing. For no one passes. No one needs to. There is nowhere to be, nothing to be done, and so even the very ground of Olympus seems to sigh beneath the weight of this divine stillness. Above the columns that rim the mountain's upper terraces, the sky wears a blanket of stars too numerous to count and too gentle to disturb. Every constellation is there, Orion, Andromeda, the Pleiades, but none of them shine for stories tonight. They shine just to glow. Inside the Hall of Harmony, a place rarely mentioned in any tale, the Muses sit scattered across oversized cushions, their instruments resting beside them, untouched. One hums a soft tune, another sketches something meaningless in the air with her finger, and still another just rocks gently in place, her eyes closed and her breathing deep. They are not inspiring mortals tonight. They are not weaving songs, or painting visions or stirring revolutions. They are simply letting their own minds wander, content to feel the shape of silence. The air smells of laurel, of cooling stone, and of distant rain that will never reach the mountain. Not far off, Zeus remains on his throne, not because he wishes to rule at this hour, but because it is simply where he ended up sitting. His golden robes lie wrinkled across his lap, His head rests back against the ornate backrest and his eyes are closed. Not in slumber, exactly, but in something quieter than awareness. A scroll slips from his fingers, fluttering to the ground, unnoticed, unread. Lightning does not crack the sky and the earth does not tremble. Tonight, the King of Gods is just another being among beings, wrapped in the same warm silence that touches them all. Near the outer columns, where vines creep up like frozen waterfalls of green, Hermes has curled up with his head resting against his satchel, one winged sandal dangling loosely off his foot. He does not dream of messages or mischief or roads. He simply breathes. Slowly. Even Cerberus, the great three-headed guardian who on occasion visits from the underworld to wander among the gods, is stretched out beneath a fig tree, each head nestled in a patch of soft moss, all three snoring, with the rhythm of distant thunder, so quiet it might be mistaken for the rumble of contentment. Somewhere tucked away in a side room of marble and glass, Ares polishes his armor without intention. Each motion is automatic and yet unhurried, like someone smoothing stones already smooth. The great god of war sits barefoot and shirtless, the edges of his shield catching the lamplight, but there is no fire in his gaze. He isn't thinking about battles, tactics, or vengeance. He's thinking of nothing at all, which for Ares is something rare and precious. The very air around him feels heavier, denser, as if even the space he occupies has chosen to lean back and exhale. All around the mountain, flowers that never wilt stay perfectly open, facing upward to a moon that doesn't move. Even time, if one could measure it here, seems to drift sideways, unconcerned with hours or meaning. And in this space between purpose and pause, Olympus becomes something no story ever described, not a place of legend or fear or awe, but a soft sanctuary for beings who have finally set their myths aside, if only for the length of one long, long night. As the night on Mount Olympus settles further into its deep and endless hush, the entire mountain feels as though it has been gently wrapped in layers of velvet stillness, muffling every divine whisper and thought, until all that remains is the soft presence of existence itself. Far from the towering halls and majestic terraces, tucked into the quieter corners of the mountain where few gods often linger, lies a narrow path bordered by whispering cypress trees and moss-covered stones, a path that leads to a secluded glade where the sacred winds never reach. Here, in a place even most legends forget to mention, sits a small circular clearing surrounded by ancient statues, each one softened by time, their features eroded into calm expressions of half-remembered divinity. It is in this hidden sanctuary that Iris, the gentle messenger of the rainbow, has chosen to rest, her wings folded neatly behind her as she leans back against a weathered column. The multicolored sheen of her garments glows faintly in the moonlight, like the memory of a dream rather than the image itself, and the golden pitcher she once used to pour messages across realms now rests by her feet, empty and clean, untouched by urgency. Around her, fireflies blink with no particular rhythm, their lights meandering through the tall grass like tiny drifting stars that never rush toward any constellation. High above, the firmament remains unchanged, vast, quiet, eternal, and, within its embrace, the gods feel less like rulers and more like children tucked in by the night. Along one of the southern balconies, Demeter stands at the edge, gazing down not at crops or cycles or the world of mortals, but at the sheer emptiness of the valley below, where clouds drift like forgotten sheep grazing the sky. She doesn't speak. She simply watches, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders more from comfort than cold. Beside her, Persephone kneels to tie the loose strap of her sandal, a task that takes longer than necessary because there is no reason to hurry, no realm demanding her presence, no underworld pulling her name with urgency. Their silence is not awkward, nor is it meaningful. It is simply there, as natural and unremarkable as the breeze that refuses to arrive. In the long, high gallery that wraps around the uppermost chamber, the twin gods Hypnos and Thanatos, sleep and death, sit side by side on a stone bench, neither of them doing what they are known for. Hypnos holds a flower he picked from a dream, spinning it slowly between his fingers while Thanatos traces absent shapes in the dust that has gathered along the edge of the railing. They do not speak of dreams or endings. They do not weigh souls or weave destinies. They simply sit together, close enough for silence to be shared without explanation. Elsewhere, on a sloped roof where the marble warms slowly under moonlight, Apollo reclines again, one hand resting on his chest, his lyre silent in his lap. His eyes remain open, not alert, just unfocused, his mind wandering through thoughts that have no beginning and no end. A leaf from an olive tree lands softly on his knee, and he does not brush it away. It is not a distraction. It is not anything at all. Beneath this dome of sacred stillness, even the river that winds around the edge of Olympus flows slower than usual, its surface smooth and unbroken, reflecting the pale lights above with perfect clarity, like a mirror no one dares to disturb. There is no thunder, no prophecy, no hero calling out for aid. Tonight, Olympus is not a stage. It is not even a throne. It is a bed of clouds and marble and quiet breath, where gods have nothing to do but be. Not eternal, not powerful, just present. The myths have been folded away like robes after a long day, and in their place a silence remains, profound in its simplicity, rich in its lack of meaning. And so the mountain exhales once more, a long, slow breath that reaches every corridor and sleeping chamber, whispering not of glory but of peace. As the midnight hour passes unnoticed on Mount Olympus, the stillness that blankets the realm deepens not into darkness, but into an even more delicate form of quiet. A hush so complete it feels sacred, as though even time itself has forgotten to tick forward. In this weightless moment suspended between breaths, the palace of the gods becomes a cradle of restful eternity. Somewhere near the northern colonnade, where ivy climbs the fluted columns like lazy green smoke and marble benches, line a promenade bathed in moonlight. Hera strolls at an unhurried pace, her bare feet making no sound on the stone. She walks not with purpose, not with authority, but simply to feel the coolness of the night against her skin. Her robe, once pristine and regal, now drifts behind her in soft folds, trailing against the dew-kissed floor like a tired thought. She pauses by a reflecting pool where lilies bloom in silence and kneels beside the water, not to gaze at her reflection, but merely to dip her fingers into the cool surface, watching the ripples widen, then fade. Not far from her, tucked between columns where shadows gather like folded fabric, Hecate, guardian of thresholds and quiet magic, leans against a pillar with her three faces turned toward the heavens, the torch in her hand unlit. Tonight, she needs no flame, for there are no paths to cross, no choices to guide. Even the crossroads, both literal and metaphorical, have agreed to sleep. Her dogs lie curled beside her, their breathing slow and deep, their loyalty resting as much as their bodies. Far below, in the quietest chamber of all, a hidden sanctuary carved into the very bones of the mountain, Gaia stirs slightly within, her grotto. The Earth Mother is not awake, not entirely, but her presence pulses gently through the stones, reminding Olympus that beneath the grandeur, beneath the myths, there is always the hum of something older, softer, eternal. In a nearby atrium open to the sky, a mild breeze finally arrives, not strong enough to move anything of substance, but just enough to rustle the tops of the cypress trees and coax a few petals from the branches of the sleeping cherry trees. The petals float downward slowly, like pieces of forgotten wishes, landing without a sound on the ground below. Above this atrium, on a balcony shaped like the crescent of a waxing moon, Artemis has resumed her perch from earlier in the night. Legs dangling over the edge, arms folded as she rests her head against the cold stone. She has no arrows in her quiver tonight, and her eyes do not scan for prey. They simply observe the night, the stars, the nothingness, and find it enough. On the other side of the balcony, Apollo has fallen into a light sleep, head tilted back, against the column, his lyre now held loosely in his lap, one string occasionally plucked by the breeze. The soft sound is less a melody and more a question left unanswered. And that is fitting, for this night has no answers, No riddles to solve, no endings to chase. Deep within the central hall, where a massive fresco depicting the cosmos spirals above the ceiling like a frozen galaxy, a cluster of minor gods and goddesses lie asleep on woven rugs and oversized cushions. Hebe, the goddess of youth, has curled herself into the side of her mother, Hera, who has since joined them, her head now bowed in dreamless slumber. Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, rests nearby with one hand on her stomach, though no cries echo through Olympus tonight. Only breathing, steady and slow. Even the flames in the golden braziers seem to flicker more slowly, as though unwilling to disturb the sleep that has embraced the mountain. Every footstep that might have echoed now fades before it's even heard. Every thought that might have risen has settled back down like dust into a quiet corner. And above it all, the stars, those ancient storytellers, continue to shine softly. Not to illuminate, not to guide, but simply to be beautiful in the background of a night that asks nothing and gives everything. In this hour, Olympus is not a mountain of might, nor a theater of divine spectacle. It is a sanctuary of pause, a realm of rest, a place where even the most eternal beings feel the simplicity of existing without expectation. And in that, perhaps, lies the truest myth of all, that even gods with all their powers and stories need stillness to remember who they are when no one is watching. As the hours stretch further into the deep well of night, Mount Olympus becomes quieter still, as though the mountain itself were descending into sleep alongside its divine inhabitants. The once magnificent throne room, a place that had echoed with proclamations, judgments, and immortal laughter, now holds only silence. A silence so complete it carries a presence of its own, something ancient and gently watchful. The torches along the walls burn low, their flames flickering without urgency, casting long, slow-moving shadows that crawl across the intricate mosaics beneath them. The giant throne of Zeus remains unoccupied now, a towering symbol of authority that for the moment has been gently forgotten, like a crown set aside in a dream. Just outside the grand chamber, along a colonnade where the moonlight paints silver stripes across the floor, Morpheus, the god of dreams, sits cross-legged on the stone, his cloak pooling around him like a thick fog of memory. He is not working tonight. No dreams are being sown into the minds of mortals. He simply watches the night, head tilted back, eyes half-lidded, as if even his thoughts have grown too drowsy to complete themselves. Around him, the night air pulses with that peculiar warmth that only exists in the deepest hours. A warmth, not of temperature but of comfort, like a blanket woven from quiet and time. In the alcove nearby, Pan reclines against a tree trunk that has grown up through a break in the marble, its roots breaking the perfect symmetry of the architecture. His pipes lie at his side untouched. His eyes are closed, mouth slightly open in a soft, snore-like hum, and his hooves twitch faintly, as though he's halfway between waking and dreaming of wide meadows and lazy rivers. High above them, the stars continue their slow dance across the sky, and their light filters through the open roof in thin beams that catch the faintest dust particles drifting in the air, making it seem as though the gods themselves breathe out galaxies. In another forgotten wing of the palace, a room that had once been used for debates among the gods now sits untouched, save for the presence of a few small deities of abstract ideas, hope, reverie, tranquility, who lie sprawled across the marble. Benches, sound asleep, their forms barely distinguishable from the cool mist curling along the floor. A single harp rests against the far wall, one string vibrating faintly, possibly from the movement of air, or perhaps from the exhale of a sleeping breath. The harp does not play music. It offers only a single tone that seems to say, "Still here." In the garden of eternal spring, tended by nymphs who have long since wandered off to nap beneath the flowering trees, the plants do not bloom with urgency. The blossoms do not open in the sunlight or close at night. They simply are, quiet, vivid, and utterly unbothered by time. Among them walks Eros, not as a mischievous bringer of love, but as a quiet figure meandering through petals and vines, his bow unstrung and forgotten, his wings trailing behind him like cloth caught on a breeze. He stops occasionally to brush a fingertip across the soft face of a flower, or to watch a dewdrop balance on a leaf's edge, never falling, only trembling slightly in anticipation of nothing. Far in the distance, somewhere along the outer rim of Olympus, the edge of the world glows faintly, a line of deep blue just beginning to dilute the sky with hints of approaching dawn, though it seems in no rush to arrive. This night, it seems, wishes to linger, to extend its arms and hold the mountain just a little longer in its spell of peace. Even the whisper of dawn is hushed here, as if afraid to disturb what has become a perfect symphony of rest. No responsibilities knock. No prayers rise from the mortal world below. No destiny demands to be fulfilled. There is only the steady rhythm of immortal breath, the faint ticking of some invisible celestial clock that has, for tonight, lost interest in forward motion. Olympus does not yawn, for gods do not grow weary as mortals do. But if it could, the mountain would sigh deeply, contentedly, as it folds its myths into quiet corners and lets the silence speak in soft, wordless lullabies. As the night on Mount Olympus presses ever deeper into its final, most hushed hours, the divine realm takes on an almost dreamlike unreality, as though the marble halls and cloud-wrapped terraces exist now more as memory than place. The stars, above, ancient, unmoving, and vast, seem to blink a little more slowly, their shimmering softened by a layer of mist that has drifted lazily over the mountain's upper reaches. Even the wind, which had long since ceased to move with any direction, now hangs still, wrapping everything in a cloak of serene breathlessness. In a quiet chamber carved directly into the mountainside where polished stone walls meet a domed ceiling, painted with fading scenes of creation and chaos, Clio, the muse of history, sits cross-legged on a wide divan, a massive scroll unrolled across her lap. But she is not reading. Her eyes move lazily over the ancient ink, but the words do not anchor themselves in her mind. She's not recalling the rise and fall of empires, the thunder of battles, or the poetry of time. She's simply being. The scroll eventually slips from her fingers and rolls shut with a quiet thud, the sound quickly absorbed by the thick hush surrounding her. Nearby, Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, rests on her side, her cheek nestled against a pile of velvet cushions. She holds an empty quill loosely in her hand, the ink dried at its tip hours ago. No verses were written, none were needed. The air in the chamber smells faintly of parchment, lavender, and old marble warmed by candlelight. The candles in tall bronze holders have burned low now, their tiny flames barely clinging to life, each one swaying gently as if asleep on its own wick. Outside the chamber, in a shallow courtyard open to the stars, Thanatos, the personification of peaceful death, sits on a low step with his back against a pillar. His presence is not grim nor heavy, but quiet and cool like the air before dawn. He gazes upward, his eyes unreadable but calm, as though he's listening for a sound that hasn't come and probably never will. A single black feather lies beside him, unmoving. He does not pick it up. Along the edge of the same courtyard, Nyx, the primordial goddess of the night, glides silently across the mosaic floor. She wears a robe that flickers like shadow and starlight combined, and though her form is tall and ageless, her movements are as unthreatening as the night breeze that brushes the tops of cypress trees. She does not speak, nor look toward any of the sleeping figures she passes. She is not here to disturb, only to exist, as she always has, just beneath the surface of all things. In another corner of Olympus, tucked within a forgotten vestibule framed by columns of pink-veined marble, Hebe, the goddess of youth, sits alone beside a fountain shaped like an open lotus. She swirls her fingers in the water without thought, watching the ripples fade into nothingness. A cup lies beside her, once used to serve nectar to the gods, now empty and upright, collecting the falling petals from a nearby vine. Her expression is not sad, not joyful, simply absent of care. Her gaze drifts upward, watching as the sky slowly begins to shift, not toward sunrise exactly, but toward something close to it, a whisper of change still too far off to matter. In the great hall where divine debates once echoed and laughter rang out in the earlier hours, Only one figure remains awake. Athena, seated with her back to one of the great lion-footed thrones. Her armor lies beside her in a heap of silver and bronze, her helmet turned upside down, a sleeping owl nestled inside it. She leans against the cold stone, eyes open, not alert, but present, her thoughts drifting like clouds that don't know which mountain to pass over. The moonlight spills through the open ceiling, casting gentle light across the floor, where cracks in the marble resemble ancient riverbeds. For now, those rivers lead nowhere. And that is exactly right. All of Olympus has become a place where direction has no meaning, where titles have no weight, and where every echo from history and prophecy has been placed gently on pause. There are no footsteps, no voices, no divine interventions, only the breath of marble halls, the hush of immortal minds in rest, and the slow glide of constellations across a sky that asks nothing and gives only stillness. Now, as the deepest part of night envelops Mount Olympus in a velvety calm, the entire mountain feels like it has been submerged beneath a sea of dreams, quiet, weightless, and suspended in time. No footsteps echo, no birds stir, no distant mortal prayers rise to break the quiet. The divine world has retreated not in sorrow but in perfect surrender to stillness. In a quiet grove behind the east wing of the palace, where moonflowers bloom in secret and vines climb lazily over forgotten altars, Hermes lies sprawled across a flat slab of stone warmed faintly by the day's long-gone sun. His winged sandals rest beside him, one tilted on its side, and his caduceus has been set carefully against the roots of a nearby tree, its golden serpents dormant, entwined like a pair of sleeping cats. His eyes are closed, but he is not truly asleep. He simply exists in a kind of limbo between thought and silence, where there is no message to deliver, no boundary to cross, no story to carry. Above him, the leaves shift in the softest of breezes, brushing against one another with a sound so faint it could be mistaken for memory. Just beyond the grove, in the Hall of Statues, where likenesses of heroes, gods, and long-faded legends stand frozen in time, Ares paces slowly, barefoot, his armor absent, his sword untouched. He does not pace with tension or impatience, but with the absent rhythm of someone walking without destination, just for the feel of his feet against the cool marble. He stops now and then to glance at the stone eyes of long-forgotten warriors, but no recognition stirs in him. Not tonight. Tonight, even the god of war has no battles to remember, no victories to recount. He leans against a column, runs a hand through his hair, and closes his eyes, not to dream, but simply to rest. Elsewhere in the palace, the smaller gods and attendants, those whose names were only briefly sung in poems or painted on old pottery, sleep soundly in their private corners, curled on cushions or nestled near the soft hum of enchanted fountains. Their breathing is steady, their dreams light, if they dream at all. In a high tower that overlooks the edge of the world, Iris has climbed quietly to sit by the narrow window, knees drawn to her chest, wings curled around her like a shawl. She gazes not at the mortal world below, which lies wrapped in its own shadows, but at the endless stars that span the sky like a road she does not need to travel tonight. The rainbow paths she usually dances across lie dormant now, faint streaks of color stretching out into the distance, fading into the dark like ribbons let go of by tired hands. Behind her, a single oil lamp flickers, casting a soft golden glow that gently outlines her form, while the silence stretches between each heartbeat, wider and calmer than ever before. In the gardens of Olympus, where nymphs once laughed and danced around the fountains, only the soft drip of water remains, a sound so consistent and gentle that it lulls even the stone satyrs carved into the walls into seeming slumber. The vines do not climb further tonight. The blossoms do not open. Growth itself feels content to wait. In the central courtyard, an owl glides silently overhead before perching on the arm of a statue, perhaps to watch, perhaps just to be still. The night has passed its midpoint, yet no one counts the hours. Even time here seems to have loosened its grip, stretching itself thin, its threads soft and unwinding. Somewhere in the shadows of the central atrium, the fates themselves lie resting. Their loom sits untouched, The spindle stilled, and the golden threads, normally taut and trembling, now lie slack, shimmering softly in the dim torchlight. They do not cut. They do not measure. Tonight, not even destiny moves. And so Olympus breathes on, its breath slow and steady, a sound like wind across distant water, a rhythm that matches neither mortal sleep nor immortal eternity, but some space in between, a place that only this night has revealed, a pause in myth and memory where everything is allowed to simply be. As Mount Olympus drifts further into the endless stretch of divine night, the fabric of myth itself seems to slacken, not unraveling but relaxing into folds of silence and soft shadow where stories pause, and breath becomes the only remaining narrative. The air has cooled to a perfect softness, neither cold nor warm, but like the feeling of silk against bare skin, barely there, yet deeply comforting. The high temple of the 12, normally the heart of celestial council and decision, stands, now as a monument to stillness. Its golden doors remain ajar, not from haste or command, but simply from having been left that way in forgetfulness or peace. Inside, each throne carved for the Olympians sits empty but not abandoned. Apollo's, once crowned in laurel and polished by his sunlit presence, catches only a pale silver beam now, falling from the high open ceiling, where the sky quietly shifts from night toward the earliest whisper of dawn. But the gods do not rise yet. They are not called. Beyond the thrones, beneath the archways that circle the temple like a crown of thought, the goddesses of grace, the charities, lie in a shared embrace, their forms curled gently together atop, a bed of woven blankets scented with myrrh and thyme. They are not laughing tonight, not dancing. Their joy has not fled, only quieted, settling into that contentment that asks for nothing and gives everything. Not far from them, a doorway opens to a side chamber where scrolls of prophecy line every wall, stacked in tall, leaning towers like the dreams of a world yet to happen. Here Cassandra, still touched by Apollo's ancient gift, sits alone, not warning anyone, not haunted by futures unseen. She gazes at a blank scroll in her lap, pen in hand, but she does not write. She watches the ink dry slowly on her fingers, marveling at how it fades to the same shade as the sky outside. Her mind, for once, is not troubled by what is coming, for nothing is coming tonight. Along the upper terraces, satyrs recline under the shelter of ivy-draped arches, their instruments set down beside them, flutes stilled, tambourines silent. They sleep in awkward, joyful poses, mouths half open, hooves stretched in impossible directions, unconcerned by posture or time. Their dreams, if they dream, are likely of shaded meadows and full goblets, of lazy sunrises that never quite arrive. In the distant alcove near the edge of Olympus, where the mountain breaks into open air and sheer clouds roll endlessly beyond sight, Zeus and Hera sit side by side on a narrow bench carved from white stone. They are not speaking. His hand rests lightly atop hers. Neither looks at the other, both gazing out across the horizon as though remembering something that hasn't happened yet. They do not wear their crowns. They are not gods here, not exactly. Just figures in a still moment, held together by quiet and the knowledge that even power must sleep. A gentle wind passes through the space between them, not to push or stir, but to linger briefly before vanishing again. It carries with it the scent of old pine and distant lightning, though no storm brews. All around them, Olympus exhales, a long, soundless sigh that trembles through every corridor, every temple, every blade of sacred grass. The myth of the gods for this one long night has dimmed into something simpler than legend. It has become presence without performance, being without purpose. The stars above remain unchanged, and yet they seem to glow more softly now, as if dimming themselves in respect for the sleeping world below. There is no thunder, no chorus, no grand revelation. Just the hum of eternity and pause, like a harp string plucked once left to vibrate gently into silence. And in this sacred in-between, the gods rest not because they must, but because even the timeless deserve to feel, if only briefly, what it is to let the world continue without them. Slowly, gently, beautifully, and without noise. As the hours Tiptoe further toward dawn, though still hidden behind a veil of quiet shadow. Mount Olympus remains wrapped in its tranquil spell, untouched by alarm, free from demand. The gods, those immortal architects of chaos and order, passion and fate, lie folded in the mountain's embrace, not as rulers over realms, but as participants in rest, absorbed by the peace of a night that has chosen to linger a little longer before letting morning arrive. In a sheltered corridor lined with murals of ancient tales, heroes wrestling monsters, lovers entwined under divine moons, titans falling to their knees, Aphrodite reclines on a chaise carved from rose marble, her gown draped over her like waves on the sand. Her eyes are half closed, not in seduction or sadness, but in the soft, quiet drift of thoughtless comfort. Her long hair spills down her shoulder, and beside her on a silk-draped table sits a polished mirror, face down, forgotten. No beauty needs tending tonight. She runs her fingertips absent-mindedly along the edge of a fruit bowl left untouched, its ripe figs and plums resting in the same warm hush that fills the chamber. Outside her window, the garden glows faintly, not from lanterns or stars, but from the sheer stillness of everything, the lightless kind of glow that comes when motion halts and everything breathes in sync. Near the edge of that same garden, a small marble gazebo rests beside a koi pond fed by a thin trickle of water from the rocks above. The water falls without splash, like a whispered lullaby, and beneath its surface the fish drift slowly, their movements elegant and purposeless. Seated cross-legged in the gazebo is Mnemosyne, the titaness of memory, her palms resting open on her knees, eyes closed not in meditation, but in calm surrender. She is not reaching into the well of recollection tonight. There are no stories to recall, no voices to echo. Even memory itself tonight has agreed to rest. From the grove beyond the pond, a few dry leaves tumble across the stone paths, not carried by wind, but nudged along by time itself, inching forward with the same slowness that now defines the entire realm. The skies above Olympus begin to change subtly, imperceptibly. Just a faint fading of stars in the east, a hint of graying velvet behind the highest peaks. But no birds sing. No divine horns announce the approaching dawn. Instead, the world holds its breath, as though even sunrise has been lulled by the same rhythm that holds the gods in stillness. In the library of whispers, a hidden vault where only gods are permitted to read the private writings of fates unwritten, Eos, the goddess of the dawn, sits curled in a wide chair, legs tucked beneath her. Her hair glows faintly with the promise of light, but she delays her ascent over the mortal world. A book rests closed on her lap, its title unreadable now in the low light. Her fingers tap its cover gently, not in impatience, but in quiet rhythm, as though she is waiting for nothing in particular and enjoying it. Behind her, golden curtains stir with a breath of morning that doesn't quite arrive. The entire realm, high above the earth yet deeper in quiet than any mortal valley, feels suspended. Every element, the marble, the air, the divine essence, itself has agreed silently to continue waiting. No one moves, no one speaks. Olympus remains in this rare and perfect moment, where gods are allowed to forget themselves, myths are permitted to unspool without climax, and the eternal pause is not for drama, but for rest. Even as the first tendrils of light begin their descent, toward the mountain's edge stretching slowly like yawns across the horizon, they arrive humbly, gently, unwilling to wake anyone before the moment calls for it. And so, the night does not end. It merely reshapes itself, becoming a deeper kind of stillness, a post-midnight serenity that even the sunrise respects. For one more hour, maybe more, Olympus is not a place of power or legend. It is a mountain of sleeping breath where everything, divine and otherwise, rests in quiet harmony with the stars that haven't yet gone. As the final curve of night holds steady above Mount Olympus, unwilling to break just yet into the light of morning, the divine realm continues to hum with that sacred and nearly imperceptible rhythm, a frequency of stillness that only gods and mountains can understand. In the western wing of the palace, where arches rise like frozen waves and the floors are inlaid with mosaics of the cosmos itself, Selene, the moon goddess, drifts slowly down a corridor, her silver gown whispering against the marble as though spun from mist. She does not walk with purpose, nor does she float with divine grandeur. Her movements resemble a thought half-formed, a dream still lingering on the edge of waking, Her eyes reflect the last glow of her moon as it begins its descent behind the jagged silhouette of Olympus's cliffs, but there is no rush in her gaze. For once, she is not guiding the tides of night or pulling her chariot across the heavens. She is simply walking, enjoying the emptiness that asks for nothing. The corridor ends in a circular chamber open to the sky, and here, a wide, still pool of water mirrors the stars, duplicating the constellation so perfectly that it's hard to tell which world is above and which is beneath. Selene kneels by its edge, touches the surface with a fingertip, and watches as her reflection breaks and reforms, soft ripples spreading like sighs. Behind her, tucked beneath a low stone arch, lies a small gathering of minor deities who have no temples, no epic tales, no worshippers calling their names. They doze together, arms and limbs tangled like children fallen asleep in the grass. Among them is Lemos, the personification of hunger, who tonight feels no emptiness, no craving, only peace. Next to him, silent and half-curled around a cushion, is Geras, the spirit of old age, who for once looks less burdened and more like a grandfather resting at the end of a long, uneventful day. Their presence adds no weight to the chamber, no consequence, only comfort. Outside, along a hanging balcony where roses bloom year-round and vines climb the railings like time itself trying to slow down, Moros, the god of longing, watches the horizon with a look not of desire but of release. His chest rises and falls gently, and his wings stretch out lazily behind him, not in flight but in ease. He is not chasing anyone tonight, not kindling passion, not inspiring unrest. He leans his head against the stone and closes his eyes, letting his thoughts dissipate like mist in morning light. Along the path beneath the balcony, Harmonia walks slowly, fingertips trailing along the leaves, her gown trailing in silence, behind her. Her presence is so balanced, so seamless with her surroundings that it seems she is not walking through Olympus but as Olympus, her peace echoing through each corner of the divine realm. Far above, the sky remains painted in deep sapphire, but now with a faint gradient of gray-yellow behind the tallest peaks, the earliest signal that the world will soon begin again. Still, nothing stirs, no horns sound. The gods remain adrift, in the same pause that has cradled them all night. In a chamber with high-stained glass where beams of color would normally scatter joyfully across the floor, the light is too soft to make itself known. Instead, the room remains muted, its colors resting like folded garments waiting for occasion. There, sitting on the edge of a low stone bed, Irene, the goddess of peace, rests her chin on her knees, her arms wrapped loosely around her legs. Her breath is steady, her eyes unfocused, and her presence so calm it seems to still even the tiny motes of dust that float in the air around her. She does not speak because there is nothing that needs saying. And in this space, no one expects her to. For this moment, and this moment only, Olympus is not a kingdom, nor a battlefield, nor a beacon. It is simply a home wrapped in stillness. No flame crackles. No voice calls out. No step breaks the silence. Only the slow, sacred continuation of a night that has given even the gods permission to just be. As the distant hint of morning continues, to hover behind the mountain's jagged edge like a thought not yet spoken, Olympus remains suspended in the perfect grace of a moment too delicate to disturb. The stars above have faded ever so slightly, their brightness softening as if they too are preparing to withdraw, but not with haste, only with the quiet dignity of those who know their time is passing and are unbothered by it. In one of the palace's oldest rooms, its walls lined with shelves of dust-covered artifacts, forgotten relics of earlier ages and quieter stories, Themis, the titaness of divine law and order, sits calmly at a desk made of dark olive wood, her scales resting, beside her perfectly balanced, untouched for hours. Her blindfold lies in her lap, folded like a silken ribbon, and her expression is not stern but serene, as if justice has nothing to weigh tonight. No verdicts to render, no consequences to observe. Her thoughts drift like dust motes in lamplight, soft and slow, and she exhales without decision or decree. Outside her chamber, the long colonnades stretch in pale lines of stone and shadow, each pillar holding up the weight of nothing urgent. Along this path, Dionysus walks slowly, cradling a nearly empty goblet of diluted wine. His hair is tousled, his robe loose, one sandal missing. He doesn't notice. He smiles faintly. Not the wild grin of celebration, but the sleepy smirk of someone who's wandered too far into a dream and has no interest in returning. As he passes a statue of himself, cast in marble with wild eyes and grapes spilling from a basket, he nods to it, not in vanity, but as if to acknowledge a version of himself he no longer needs to play. A few feet away, tucked within a stone, niche surrounded by ivy, sits a small fountain shaped like a lion's mouth. Its water flows gently, just enough to form a clear and constant trickle, the sound blending perfectly into the background of divine quiet. Nearby, two nymphs sleep beneath a laurel tree, their limbs tangled and their faces turned toward the canopy of stars above, though neither stirs as a leaf lands softly on a shoulder. Above them, tucked between spires and balconies where few tread, Ananke, the primordial force of necessity, stands unmoving on a narrow ledge. She has no body, not really, only the shape of inevitability cloaked in night. But tonight even she is paused, her threads of fate left to dangle loose and directionless, as if allowing possibility to breathe before tightening its grip again, with dawn. Along the garden walls, vines have crept further in the dark, their tendrils wrapping around stone urns and curling into cracks as if drawn by the scent of timelessness. Their leaves do not flutter, for no wind pushes them, only the soft weight of moisture from a sky not yet ready to cry light into being. And through all of this, the gods remain quiet. Hypnos, god of sleep, floats gently over the palace now, his soft wings brushing the air like a feather tracing silk. He does not descend. He doesn't need to. Everyone below has already followed him. His presence passes over rooftops, past open windows where divine faces lie in soft repose, past empty temples and silent gardens, past altars that do not burn. In his wake, he leaves not dreams but a kind of stillness so profound that even the soil beneath Olympus seems to murmur lullabies to itself. The earth does not turn here with noise. It glides, slowly, smoothly, indifferently. Somewhere beyond, the cliffs, the horizon finally begins to pale, the black giving way to a tender gray, then a soft blue. It touches only the tips of the furthest peaks. Still, no one wakes. Olympus is not done resting. Not yet. And so, for a little while longer, the myths remain unspoken, the stories untold, the heroes unborn. For just this one night, now slipping into a morning too respectful to arrive quickly, Mount Olympus remains what it is rarely allowed to be: silent, sacred, and utterly, peacefully still. As the sky beyond Mount Olympus begins to shift from deep charcoal to a tender shade of lavender, the approach of morning carries with it no urgency, no interruption, only the soft suggestion that time, even here, continues to move forward, gently and without demand. The gods, wrapped in the embrace of the mountain's longest night, do not rise, do not stir, and do not resist this final extension of silence. Along the edge of a high marble terrace that overlooks the vast cloud-blanketed world below, Prometheus sits with his back against a sun-warmed pillar, though no sun has yet arrived. He gazes out into the horizon with the heavy eyes of one who has seen too much and for this one rare evening is asked to see nothing at all. The chains of his punishment do not cling to his wrists here. On Olympus, for now, he is not a rebel nor a bearer of fire, but simply a man sitting in stillness, tracing invisible shapes in the condensation that has formed on the floor beneath his hand. Not far behind him, nestled within the folds of a sheltered atrium where flowering vines form a natural ceiling overhead, Astraea, the Star Maiden, lies with her hands folded on her stomach. watching the light change slowly through the lattice of leaves above. Her stars, which she once bore across the night sky with grace and patience, now dim quietly one by one, retiring not in defeat, but in fulfillment, like candles gently blown out in reverence. Her breathing is deep, slow, and synced with the rhythm of Olympus itself. In the far western tower, a slender staircase spirals downward into a crystalline observatory, its floor inlaid with polished lapis and mother-of-pearl, forming a map of the heavens so intricately designed that each footstep seems to echo through the constellations. Here sits Urania, muse of astronomy, cross-legged before a great open dome that reveals the dissolving night sky in its final moment of perfection. Her fingers rest lightly on a star chart, though she has stopped calculating, stopped observing, stopped naming. Tonight, even the stars do not need to be known. They are content to simply fade, unmeasured and unexamined, into the soft awakening of day. Across Olympus, the final dreams drift like feathers through the halls and gardens, gentle and shapeless, clinging only lightly to those who sleep. No god is troubled. No soul is summoned. Eos, the goddess of the dawn, has begun to stir in the highest chamber of the eastern wing, but even she delays, leaning against a balcony railing as she watches the sky stretch and yawn. Her hair glows faintly, touched by the sun's first intention rather than its arrival, and her gown flutters in a breeze too subtle to feel. She does not yet open the gates of light. She waits. Waits because the stillness below is too perfect to break, even for the sun. In a courtyard filled with statues of long-forgotten demigods and distant ancestors, the shadows shift slowly, reluctantly, like theater curtains being drawn with the utmost care. The stone figures stand bathed in a wash of soft blue and gray, their expressions worn smooth by centuries, their frozen gestures now part of the quiet choreography of the mountain. One would almost think they too are at peace. Perhaps they are. For on this night, and only this night, Olympus itself has seemed to forget its grandeur, its pride, its noise. There have been no declarations from thrones, no celestial judgments, or grand performances, only the profound echo of rest, carried from chamber to chamber like a song hummed by silence itself. The clouds that drift lazily around the mountain's shoulders begin to brighten ever so faintly, infused with a pale, pink glow that whispers of morning without insisting on it. And still, no god moves, no door opens, no spell lifts. The mountain breathes, and in its breath there is contentment, a contentment that no tale ever told, for the myths have always favored the thunder, the passion, the spectacle. But here now, in this extended hour before waking, Olympus tells a different story. A story of stillness, a story of gods who, like mortals, sometimes need nothing more than quiet. And so, beneath the lightning sky and above a world that has not yet begun to stir, the home of the immortals remains shrouded. In the final hour of its most sacred pause, unmoving, unspoken, untouched. As the veil between night and morning begins to thin, not with urgency but with a kindness that only the heavens can offer, Mount Olympus lies in its most delicate hour, a moment between two worlds where darkness is not quite gone and light not yet fully born. The mountain, wrapped in its final breath of shadow, exhales a hush so complete it feels like a prayer whispered by the earth itself. Along a quiet corridor lined with golden lanterns whose flames have long since burned into slivers of blue, Hecate, goddess of thresholds and twilight, stands at a crossroads formed by 4 arched hallways, her long black robes flowing like smoke against the stone floor. In her hands, 3 unlit torches rest, each pointed in a different direction, yet none of them raised. She does not need to guide souls tonight. No one wanders. No one calls. The air around her is thick with the essence of pause, and she remains still, listening to something deeper than silence, something old and full and gently forgetful. Her presence marks the turning point of the evening, not as an interruption, but as an acknowledgement that all moments, even divine ones, must eventually pass. Far above her, in one of the many balconies carved high into Olympus's face, Eris, The goddess of discord leans against the railing with her chin in her hand. Her eyes, which usually gleam with mischief or smolder with agitation, are dimmed now, tired not from effort, but from the lack of it. She watches the clouds shift. Below, their movement slower than thought, slower even than time. There is no conflict in her, no chaos to spark. For once, her world has nothing to disrupt, and in that nothing she finds an unusual peace. Behind her, a table that might once have been overturned in argument now holds a still bowl of figs, untouched and serene. Elsewhere on the mountain, in a courtyard draped in ivy and shadow, the Hours, those goddesses who govern the order of the day, sit shoulder to shoulder on a low marble bench, their sandals removed, their gowns loose, their heads leaned gently on one another. Thallo, Oxo, and Carpo, who usher in the growth of all things, sit without tending. Their duties sleep with them. The leaves around them do not unfurl, the flowers do not bloom, and the sun still waits behind the peaks, as though it too has been lulled into patience. Even the birds that often begin their morning calls remain silent beneath the eaves, feathers fluffed against the final coolness of night. In a chamber rarely entered, filled with ancient maps and symbols of balance, Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, sits on the steps of her dais, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her sword rests beside her, polished and unused. Her scales lie across her lap, one side tipped slightly more than the other, but she doesn't correct it. She simply stares ahead, into the soft glow of a torch nearly extinguished, and allows her mind to drift in the weightless freedom of a moment unmeasured. Olympus, in this final stretch of slumber, becomes not a monument to power, but a sanctuary of surrender. No deity holds court. No wind carries prophecy. No thunder rattles the firmament. Only a single breeze, infused with the first scent of morning, cool, clean, faintly floral, sneaks through the columns and curls around ankles and necks like an affectionate ghost. On the highest parapet, just beneath the sky's edge, Kronos, the embodiment of time, stands alone. He does not turn the gears of the cosmos. He does not rewind or advance. His hourglass sits untouched at his feet, the last few grains of sand, clinging to its center like they too resist the inevitability of motion. He closes his eyes, and for the briefest stretch of divine stillness, even time forgets itself. And so Olympus waits, not in reluctance, but in reverence, for the first full breath of day. In this breathless pause, every god, every garden, every shadow and stone floats together in the softest surrender. A pause before myth resumes. A space before light defines the shapes of things again, and within that space, all of Olympus glows, with a peace so deep, so unrecorded, that even eternity, if it could sleep, would choose to do so here. As the first faint golden lines of morning begin to stretch themselves across the distant horizon, still hesitant to crest the peaks of Mount Olympus, the divine realm holds on to the final remnants of its long, sacred stillness, with the gentle defiance of one who knows that peace is fleeting. The mountaintop is quiet still, not because it must be, but because it chooses to be, a voluntary continuation of a night so perfectly uneventful that even the air, even the marble beneath the god's feet, seems reluctant to wake. In a quiet wing of the palace once built for ceremonies and divine recitals, the amphitheater lies empty, its tiered stone benches kissed by dew, its stage unlit and silent. Here, Melpomene, muse of tragedy, sits alone in the front row, her mask of sorrow resting beside her on the bench like a discarded thought. Her hands are folded neatly in her lap, and her face is free of expression, not out of numbness, but because she simply has no emotion to offer this hour. Even grief, even art requires momentum. And tonight, that momentum has stilled. She looks out over the silent stage, not seeing it as a place of performance, but as a space where silence has chosen to sing its own quiet song. Further down a vine-lined passage where pink bougainvillea droop like sleeping thoughts, Philotes, the goddess of affection, walks barefoot across the warm, smooth floor, her hands trailing along the wall as though touching the memories of conversations, embraces, and gentle laughter that once echoed through this hall. Tonight there are no reunions to bless, no bonds to strengthen, only her presence moving slowly through the quiet, leaving behind no trace except a soft warmth in the air, behind a colonnade that overlooks the sea of clouds resting far below. The mountain's ledges, Aeolus, keeper of the winds, rests with his back against a pillar, his windbags unstrapped and forgotten at his feet. His eyes are closed, head tilted upward, lips parted slightly, not in speech but in surrender. There are no gusts summoned, no storms guided, and the sky beyond him remains still, the kind of still that makes even movement feel like a memory. His domain, always in motion, now sits idle, and he welcomes the reprieve. Above him, nestled, high in a hanging garden where golden blossoms open only in shadow, Olympus, the spirit of hope, sits in the crook of an old tree, arms around her knees. She does not glow. She does not speak. She simply watches as the indigo sky begins its slow transformation into something brighter, her heart untroubled by the slowness of dawn's approach. Her presence feels like the heartbeat of the mountain, itself, not loud, not commanding but continuous, steady, necessary. Near the central fountain where divine guests often once gathered in clusters of conversation and counsel, the water flows in lazy spirals, curling over the edges like time running its fingers through eternity. Seated nearby is Metis, the goddess of wisdom and deep thought, who once advised Zeus and foresaw many futures. Tonight, however, she sees nothing ahead, and that is precisely what she desires. Her mind is not racing, her gaze is not focused. She lets her thoughts dissolve into the ripples of the fountain, one by one like paper boats released on a silent river. Even knowledge here and now is allowed to rest. Across Olympus, in every hidden chamber and open garden, in every hall and high stair, the silence has changed slightly, not vanished, not broken, but softened at the edges by the first signs of dawn. A bird somewhere stirs beneath its wing. A leaf quivers, though not from breeze. The world is not waking. It is leaning, gently, cautiously, toward awareness. But Olympus, still sacred in its pause, holds fast to this final breath of night. It is a realm that has stepped outside of obligation, existing briefly as a sanctuary for the immortal and eternal, where roles are not performed and myths do not unfold. For this one lingering moment, the gods do not move. They do not need to. They are simply and beautifully here. And the mountain, wise and ancient, shelters them still in its vast and dream-wrapped silence, knowing that once day breaks, once light floods its marble veins again, the stories will resume. But not yet. Not now. For now, everything remains suspended in the final verse of Olympus's most quiet hymn. As dawn lingers just beyond the final curve of the sky, refusing still to push the stars completely away, Mount Olympus remains suspended in the gentle exhale of its longest, most peaceful night. There is something sacred in this resistance, in the way the mountain seems to cradle every god and spirit in one unified breath, holding back the sun not with force, but with sheer stillness. In a shaded glen at the foot of a grove where olive trees bow under the weight of their own age, Eleos, the personification of mercy, sits on a carved stone bench, hands folded over her lap, watching as the last dew collects along the edges of a laurel leaf. Her expression holds no concern, no judgment, only the quiet patience of one who knows that peace, when present, must be savored. She does not speak, for there is nothing to forgive tonight, no pleas to answer, no grief to relieve. Around her, the earth holds its shape gently as though molded by kindness itself. Just beyond her grove, down a winding path flanked by sleeping statues of creatures both divine and mythic, stands a small round temple open to the sky, where the floor is decorated with a spiral of inlaid pearl and onyx. In its center, Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, walks slowly in a circle, barefoot, her footsteps deliberate yet without destination. She recites nothing, conjures no pasts, and brings forth no visions. Tonight, memory is not required to serve history. Tonight, memory rests. She walks only to feel the cool stone beneath her soles, to let her awareness stretch into the edges of timelessness where thought becomes vapor. Overhead, The first faint thread of golden light brushes against the clouds, still low on the horizon, painting them not with brilliance but with something softer, more diffused, like light viewed through tears never shed. Near the edge of the eastern cliff, in a small garden where poppies sway even without wind, Moros, the spirit of doom and fate, sits alone with his legs stretched in front of him, staring at the place where sky meets world. He is not brooding. He is not conjuring destinies or speaking grim truths. His dark cloak rests beside him like a blanket folded neatly, unused. His shoulders are slouched with the rare comfort of being unneeded, and he hums a single low tone beneath his breath, something wordless and circular, as though mimicking the Earth's own rotation. It is a sound that neither comforts nor disturbs. It simply is. Elsewhere, tucked beneath the marble dome of an observatory long closed for the night, Astraeus, the god of dusk and stars, leans back in a reclining chair carved from starlight and stone. His fingertips gently trace constellations into the air, though not with the intention of shaping them. He draws only from habit, from memory, from something older than even Olympus itself. The night, his domain, has served its purpose, and now it slowly recedes, but not without ceremony. He watches the final stars blink out, not as a goodbye, but as a gentle exit, like guests slipping quietly from a room where laughter has faded, into contentment. In the wide, pillared atrium near the palace's heart, the sacred fire of Hestia burns as it always has, softly, without flare. The flame does not flicker higher with the coming light, nor does it die. It merely continues quiet and steady, a presence that exists without demanding attention. No god stands nearby, no offerings are placed at its feet, and yet the warmth spreads outward like breath, seeping into every arch, every corridor, every inch of Olympus, with a reminder that the mountain is more than a myth. It is a home. Above it all, at the highest terrace where only clouds dare rest, Eos finally lifts her gaze, the first full ray of sun cresting behind her like a reluctant promise. Her expression is one of reverence, not performance. She knows what comes next, but still she waits, just long enough for the final note of Olympus's silent symphony to resolve itself in peace. Then, and only then, the morning begins. Not with sound or blaze, but with the softest increase in light. And as it touches stone and skin and God, Olympus stirs, not to resume duty, but to remember that even eternity benefits from rest. And so the sacred stillness breaks, not abruptly, but gently, like a dream fading into waking thought. As dawn slowly unfurls across the skies above Mount Olympus, it does so with the grace of a whisper, like the soft opening of a curtain no one asked to be drawn, yet none resist. The stars, long companions of the night, now fade into the pale canvas of early morning without ceremony, their light lingering faintly like the echo of music just played. The gods, wrapped in the final folds of stillness, begin to stretch not their limbs, but their awareness. Gently, cautiously, as though they fear disturbing a silence too precious to lose. In a quiet pavilion nestled between twin cypress trees, Harmonia, goddess of balance and concord, sits cross-legged on a cushion of pale blue silk, her hands resting palms up in her lap, her breath moving in slow, measured waves. She faces the horizon not with expectation but with quiet acceptance, watching as color returns to the sky, line by line, like a brush painting calm across the heavens. Behind her, the low murmurs of waking life begin to hum within the marble veins of Olympus. Not loud, not urgent, just the soft rustle of robes, the creak of ancient steps, the breath of a realm remembering itself after the longest rest it has known. At the far side of the mountaintop, beside a narrow stream that winds around sleeping willows, Euphrosyne, the goddess of good cheer, sits with her feet in the cold water, toes curling lazily in the flow. Her smile is faint, dreamy, more from comfort than joy, and she hums a low circular tune that carries just far enough to stir the leaves nearby. It is not the tune of festivity, but one of contentment, of a heart completely unbothered by anything beyond this very moment. A frog croaks once and then falls silent again, as if realizing it has spoken out of turn. From the upper balconies of the palace where the rising sun begins to streak across polished stone and gilded edges, Apollo finally stirs. He sits upright, blinking at the soft orange light spreading over his shoulders, rubbing sleep from his eyes as if it were something unfamiliar. His lyre lies beside him, untouched through the night, and even now he does not reach for it. Music will come later, perhaps. For now, he sits in reverie, watching the sun, his sun, rise without fanfare, as though it, too, had chosen not to demand attention. Near him, Artemis emerges from the shadowed edge of a columned hallway, her bow strapped loosely to her back, though she carries no arrows. Her stride is not the alert step of the huntress, but the soft tread of someone walking through memory. She glances toward her twin, their eyes meeting briefly with a nod that says everything and nothing. Then she continues, disappearing into the awakening garden beyond, content to let the world unfold without her direction. In the lower courtyard, satyrs begin to shift under layers of ivy and leaves, their snores tapering into long sighs as the warmth of day touches their skin. A few birds, brave and cautious, begin to chirp from the olive branches, testing the sound of morning with a note here, a trill there. The nymphs, still sprawled among pillows and mossy alcoves, begin to move, gently, not rising but adjusting, stretching arms and blinking slowly like petals sensing the return of the sun. In the sacred center of Olympus, the hearth continues to glow under Hestia's ever-gentle care. She does not move to tend it. She doesn't need to. The fire knows its place, and like everything else on this mountain, it understands the rhythm of the day's first breath. Around her, the shadows pull back, not in fear of light, but in graceful retreat, making way for the return of roles and rituals, myths and meanings. Yet for this 1 hour, even as the sky shifts from lavender to gold, Olympus remains suspended in the grace of its quiet rebirth. No horns sound, no thrones summon, no judgment waits in ambush. Only the soft merging of silence and light, a transition so slow it barely exists. The gods do not rise as rulers, but as dwellers of a realm that has, for a rare and blessed span of time, remembered what it means to simply be. And in this delicate emergence from the longest calm, Olympus glows, not with power, but with peace. As the first full light of dawn spills gently across the peaks and terraces of Mount Olympus, the spell of the night begins to release its hold, not in haste or rupture, but with a soft parting, like silk slipping through relaxed fingers. The mountain, wrapped in golden mist, no longer sleeps, but it does not yet move. It lingers in the afterglow of rest, in that fragile space between silence and song, where nothing is demanded and everything simply waits. The vast courtyard, once echoing with divine laughter and fiery debates, is now touched by sunlight that paints the marble in strokes of pale gold and blush rose. There in its center stands a tall column crowned with a simple bronze flame dish, and for the first time in hours a curl of smoke begins to rise, not fiercely, but delicately, as though Olympus itself is sighing awake. Hestia, quiet guardian of hearth and home, steps forward from the shade, her presence unchanged from the night before, modest, centered, warm. She kneels beside the small fire, touches nothing, says nothing, and still the flame responds, growing slightly brighter, flickering not with need but with acknowledgement. Around her, the great doors of the palace remain closed, and no trumpets sound, no curtains draw back. Yet something in the air has shifted. It is not urgency, it is remembrance. In the quiet grove of laurels just beyond the eastern gates, a handful of gods walk slowly between the trees, not as rulers returning to duty, but as beings still wrapped in the softness of the night's calm. Athena walks with her hands behind her back, her armor still absent, replaced by a light robe cinched with a length of olive-green cord. Her eyes are focused, but not sharp. This morning, even wisdom stretches before it sharpens. She listens, not to voices or strategy, but to the rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of a waking stream. At her side, Hermes ambles barefoot, his winged sandals dangling from his hand, tracing idle shapes in the dust with his toe as he walks. He does not speak. For once, he carries no messages, no trickery, no burden of swiftness. This morning, even movement itself walks instead of runs. Beyond the grove, perched upon a staircase washed in golden light, Gaia stirs in her chamber of roots and stone. Vines have crept through the windows, curling around her wrists as though holding her gently in sleep. But she is awake now, her eyes open and ancient, her breathing slow and deep as she absorbs the change in rhythm above her. No word leaves her lips, but the soil beneath Olympus pulses faintly in time with her heartbeat. Life, after all, always begins again, even for gods. High in the western spires, Apollo finally lifts his lyre. He does not strum it yet. He only holds it, fingers brushing the strings as if reacquainting himself with the shape of sound. The light catches in his golden hair, and his gaze settles on the edge of the world, where the sea reflects the sky like a mirror too still to disturb. The Muses gather around him, yawning, stretching, whispering verses that will soon become poems, but for now remain only sounds without form. Below, nymphs tend to the vines and flowers with slow, deliberate care, not for show, not for duty, but because the act itself feels right. On a balcony wrapped in honeysuckle, Artemis watches, a hawk drift on the morning winds. She lifts her hand in greeting and the hawk circles once before disappearing into the high sunlit clouds. Her bow rests against the wall. She will use it later. Not yet. Not now. Around her, the mountain continues to glow, not in radiance or divine spectacle, but in quiet dignity. Olympus is not shaking off the night. It is absorbing it, letting it become part of the morning's calm foundation. The myths that slumbered during the long evening will soon awaken. They will step back into their stories, their battles, their beauty. But even those stories, bright and dramatic as they are, owe everything to this. The quiet pause, the gentle breath, the night that asked nothing and gave peace in return. And so as the sun rises fully and the first bird calls out with certainty, Mount Olympus does not erupt with activity. It nods to the morning. It stretches its limbs. It remembers that before power comes stillness, and before story comes silence. And in that silence, the gods have found not just rest but something older, deeper, and far more sacred. The comfort of simply being. Now fully touched by dawn, Mount Olympus does not leap into action but rather continues to drift gently from the soft embrace of night into the quiet responsibilities of daylight, like a dream that has decided to linger a little longer on the edge of memory before dissolving. The golden light rests across every surface, the temple roofs, the curve of marble statues, the wings of sleeping spirits, with the softness of silk, illuminating the world without overwhelming it. Along a quiet stretch of veranda shaded by hanging vines and flowering jasmine, the Horae, the goddesses of the hours, begin to stir. Their movement is delicate, like the shifting of petals at first light. Eunomia lifts her chin to the sky, her breath slow and steady as she adjusts the folds of her gown, which ripple faintly in the morning breeze. Dyke traces her finger along the edge of a sundial not yet casting sharp shadows, and Irene, with a wreath of laurel in her lap, hums a low melody to no one in particular. They are the keepers of rhythm, the bringers of orderly time, and yet this morning even they do not hurry. Time itself seems to yawn beside them, unbothered by the weight of measurement. Not far away, in a sun-warmed hall where the columns rise, like tree trunks to a canopy of light, Hephaestus stands before his anvil, the tools of his craft resting neatly on a cloth. He doesn't pick them up. His hands, scarred and skilled, hover above the hammer as though remembering its weight, and his gaze remains fixed on a half-formed sculpture that no longer demands to be finished. There is no spark, no clang of metal, no steam, only a faint creak of settling stone, the breath of a forge allowed for once to cool without guilt. Across the garden terrace, Aphrodite walks alone, trailing her fingers across the tops of the roses blooming anew in the morning sun. She doesn't smile, nor does she weep. Her beauty, usually dazzling, is now softened, drowsy, humbled by stillness. The doves at her heels follow without cooing, their feathers ruffling in the quiet breeze. She stops to watch a drop of dew slide slowly from the edge of a petal and fall to the earth. It is the kind of moment no poem would capture. Too small, too silent, too perfect to be remembered and yet too full to be forgotten. Beside the reflecting pool where the sky meets the water so seamlessly it becomes unclear where one ends and the other begins, Zeus stands with his hands clasped behind his back, staring into the depthless surface. The thunderbolt, for now, is not with him. His robe billows faintly, but he does not move. He does not speak. For all his power, all his legend, he looks not like a king this morning, but a figure carved from patience. He watches the clouds as they pass, slower now, less, driven by story and more by existence. Hera joins him quietly, standing at his side without a word. She does not ask him what he's thinking. She does not remind him of the coming day. They simply share the silence, letting it speak more clearly than any prophecy. Below them, across, the lower terraces and quiet steps, immortals begin to rise, not in waves, not in noise, but one by one, like stars fading at dawn. Each god, each spirit, each whispering presence takes their time, not because they are lazy, but because they know the worth of the night they've just lived. A night that, while uneventful in mortal terms, has offered the most valuable gift an eternal being can receive: a pause from becoming, and permission to simply be. The great bells of Olympus, perched high within their towers, do not yet toll. The day has begun, yes, but gently, humbly, wrapped in the golden hush of a story that knows its next chapter but does not rush to write it. Even the myths themselves seem to stretch and settle before they stand. And thus Olympus wakes, not with might or miracle, but with mindfulness, gratitude, and grace. With the golden sheen of morning now gently spread across every marble archway and sunlit corridor of Mount Olympus, the divine world steps lightly across the bridge from silence into subtle motion. Not with fanfare or command, but with the quiet dignity of beings who know that time will come to them whether they rise or not. The air carries a calm weight, full of memory and promise, as if the mountain itself were sighing in contentment after a night of sacred stillness. Down in the orchard beyond the western wing, where citrus trees hang heavy with fruit that glows, in the morning light, Demeter walks slowly between the rows, her fingertips brushing across the orange-scented leaves. She does not harvest. She does not bless the soil. Today, she is not the provider or the nourisher. She is simply present, her sandals making soft prints in the dew-damp earth, her thoughts as slow and full as the ripening lemons overhead. Occasionally she pauses, not to inspect or to measure, but to simply breathe. Nearby, Persephone kneels beneath a pomegranate tree, its shadow stretched long across the grass. She holds one fruit in her palm, unbroken, its skin glistening with morning light. Her expression is unreadable, not sad, not joyful, just still, like someone listening to her own heartbeat for the first time in a while. There is no urgency in her posture, no expectation. This is not the underworld. This is not the season of parting. This is the hour between things, when roles are forgotten and only the moment remains. Not far away, in the temple of Muses, soft footsteps begin to echo not in grandeur, but like the return of familiar thoughts. Calliope stands at a podium, running her hands across blank parchment, the tip of her stylus still untouched by ink. Behind her, Terpsichore hums a tune, slowly dancing with herself across a shaft of morning light as though rehearsing for a day that will unfold at its own leisure. No one performs yet. No audience waits. The Muses exist not for worship, but for breath. For inspiration born not from urgency but from quiet readiness. At the palace baths, where steam curls over marble edges and the scent of mint and thyme rises in slow tendrils, Hebe pours water from a gold-handled pitcher into a wide basin, her movements fluid and without flourish. The water glows faintly, kissed by divine light, and for a moment her reflection in the surface seems younger still, softer than immortality. She sets the pitcher down, placing a towel across her arm as though serving a guest yet to arrive, then leans against the edge of the stone to watch the sun inch a little higher through the columns. Her peace is not passive. It is earned by the long, still night, and by the knowing that the world does not begin because the sun rises, but because hearts decide to greet it. Just above, on the open balcony that wraps around the heart of Olympus, Hermes lounges on a cushioned bench, his winged sandals now retied but his posture still utterly relaxed. He tosses a coin into the air, not to choose a path or trick of fate, but just to watch it spin. The sound of its fall is gentle, its echo brief, as though even chance itself respects the quiet of this morning. Around him, the mountain breathes, steadily a living monument to timelessness held not by force but by the careful balance of motion and restraint. No prayers rise from the mortal world today. Not yet. The altars below are still shaded, the incense unlit. The gods have this hour to themselves, this final piece of quiet before the gears of myth begin to turn once more. And so, with footsteps, soft, eyes half open and breath aligned with the rhythm of light, Olympus continues its slow awakening. Not toward story, but toward presence. It is a time without questions or answers, a time that belongs to no destiny or decree. Only to now. Only to peace. Now well into morning, Mount Olympus glows not with divine spectacle, but with the gentle radiance of a world still savoring its long-held silence, as though even daylight understands the sanctity of a night so beautifully uneventful. The halls no longer sleep, yet they do not rush. The gods no longer dream, yet they have not fully returned to the roles from which they briefly stepped away. Along the steps of a terraced garden overlooking the rolling clouds below, the 9 Muses gather not in their usual formation of guidance and song, but in the soft randomness of friends enjoying each other's company. Clio reclines beneath an olive tree, tracing lazy circles into the earth with the end of a feathered pen. She speaks not of histories, does not recount the glories of kings or the rise of cities. Today, memory rests beneath the weight of nothing pressing. Erato, goddess of love poetry, sits nearby, braiding flowers into a long strand of vine with no intention of wearing it. She hums quietly, a lullaby meant for no one, a melody that has no beginning, no chorus, no end. Her sisters lie scattered, on benches, cushions, and the grass itself, their robes glowing in the new sun, their voices blending like wind brushing through leaves, so soft it cannot be called conversation, only presence. A small amphora of nectar sits in the middle of them, uncorked, untouched, not because they have forgotten it, but because they haven't needed it. The sweetness of this hour is already enough. Nearby, in a shaded corridor lined with tall bronze mirrors, Narcissus walks slowly, his eyes not fixed on his reflection, but gazing through it. Each polished surface shows him what he expects to see. Yet today he doesn't linger. There is no vanity in his step, no pause for admiration. It is as though even he has grown tired of seeing himself and instead watches how the light catches on the curves of stone, how the ivy moves without sound across the tile. For a figure known for self-obsession, there is remarkable stillness in his steps, as though he too has been softened by the mountain's quietude. In the dining hall, vast and sun-drenched, though quiet as a whisper, the long tables are set, but empty. Plates gleam in the soft glow, goblets shimmer with morning light, and bowls of fruit sit waiting beneath gauzy linen veils. Hebe walks through the space slowly, her fingers grazing the backs of chairs, straightening them not because they need it, but because the act itself brings order. The clink of one cup against another sounds loud in the hush, and even that is met with a pause, as though the room itself questions whether it is too soon to let the day begin. Down by the edge of the reflecting pools where wildflowers grow between cracks in the marble, Pan rests on a bed of moss with his reed pipes across his chest. He is awake, eyes blinking at the blue sky above, his fingers tapping out rhythms that never quite become a tune. A nearby cicada calls out once, then falls silent as if embarrassed to break the stillness. Even nature, so often wild and noisy, joins in this mutual agreement of quiet presence. And from the highest balcony, where one can see the curve of the earth if one bothers to look, Zeus stands once again, not draped in lightning, not flanked by eagles or thrones, but simply standing, his hands on the stone railing, his posture calm. His gaze isn't fixed on the horizon. It hovers somewhere in between, somewhere within, like a god remembering how to be a man if only for a morning. Hera, once more at his side, tucks a strand of hair behind her ear, and together they observe the awakening of a world that isn't, rushing to meet its day. For today, Olympus is not a place of legend. It is not a stage. It is a sanctuary where every myth has taken off its mask and let its silence speak. And in this long golden morning, it is not power or prophecy that defines this place, but presence, quiet, thoughtful, and eternal. With the sun now fully ascended and casting soft golden arcs across the highest spires and deepest gardens of Mount Olympus, the mountain enters a sacred equilibrium, a moment where light has settled, warmth has arrived, and yet motion remains subdued, deliberate, almost reverent. The divine realm is awake but not yet active, as if the gods themselves are choosing to savor each breath, each sound, each flicker of sunlight as it touches ancient stone. In a quiet chamber open to the breeze with tall linen curtains drifting, lazily in the morning air, Ether, the primordial god of the upper sky, sits on a wide sill of polished marble, his legs stretched out before him, his eyes half closed. His presence is barely more than a shimmer, a pale glow that fills the room not with power but with calm. He says nothing, because what is there to say when the sky itself listens? His essence stretches out beyond the balcony, into the light, blending into the very atmosphere. There is no border between his form and the brightness that surrounds him. He is not in Olympus, he is Olympus, or at least part of the very air it breathes. Below, in the orchard paths that loop through the lower levels of the mount, clusters of young nymphs walk barefoot across the sun-warmed stone. Their arms linked loosely, their laughter barely more than exhaled thoughts. They are not tending to the trees, not guiding growth or guarding secrets. They are simply walking, sharing glances, pausing to touch the soft moss that grows between ancient tiles, leaning their heads on each other's shoulders with the kind of ease that belongs only to beings who have no need to measure time. One stops to pluck a petal from a bloom and watches as it catches the breeze and dances upward, higher and higher, before vanishing into the glowing sky. Along the ridge that looks down over the mortal world, Hermes stands again, not lounging, this time, but balanced easily on one foot atop a narrow spire, his eyes scanning the clouds far below. He could fly. He could descend. He could deliver, guide, warn, retrieve. But he does none of it. Today, the wind moves without needing his command, and the messages of the world can wait. He closes his eyes and lets the sun warm his back, letting himself exist without obligation. Behind him, along the curved walkways that wind through sculpted gardens, the three Graces, Aglaia, Euphrosyne, and Thalia, walk slowly in a staggered rhythm, their gowns catching glimmers of light, their fingers trailing along hedges still damp with morning dew. They do not speak. Their joy, so often a burst of radiance and music, has mellowed into a quiet kind of contentment. They turn their faces to the sun like flowers, not seeking power, only warmth. In the hall of records, where golden scrolls are stacked in shelves, taller than trees, and the scent of old parchment fills the air, Themis sits at a broad table, her hands folded gently atop a closed book. The scales beside her lie balanced, untouched. She is not weighing truths today, not assigning guilt, not offering counsel. She is resting in the certainty that, for now, all things are as they should be. Even justice takes no steps in this hour. Far above, in a sky terrace open to the east, Selene, now free of her moon's duties, reclines on a bed of white furs and cloud stuff, her silver hair cascading down like a quiet waterfall. She stares into the space where stars once shone, and smiles not because she misses them, but because she knows they will return just as night will. Her time will come again, but this morning is not about waiting, it is about being present, being whole, being unhurried. Across Olympus, the light settles into every corner, every chamber, every sleeping vine and glimmering surface. Not to awaken, but to caress, to hold the mountain in the arms of the day the way night had cradled it before. There is no rush to become myth again, no pressure to speak in thunder or prophecy. The gods are still in their pause, their peace, their long exhale. The morning does not build toward crescendo. It holds steady in its grace. Olympus is a breathing thing today, alive, alert, but calm. It is not dreaming anymore, but it is not yet doing. It is that perfect, rare middle, a golden thread stretched gently between silence and story. By the time the sun has risen high enough to cast short shadows beneath the olive trees and marble pillars of Mount Olympus, the realm has fully entered its waking phase, yet still retains the softness of all that came before. A glow, not just of light but of restraint. The mountain, brushed in warmth and clarity, does not forget the silence it held through the long night, and neither do its inhabitants. Across the expansive training fields just beyond the eastern gate, an area usually reserved for the thundering steps of gods at practice or divine contests of skill, Ares walks alone, his armor absent, his sword sheathed and forgotten against the base of a laurel tree. The ground beneath his feet, marked by centuries of combat and the echoes of shouted names, now feels strangely still. He moves with a slow, measured gait, his fingers brushing along the hilts of spears arranged in a neat rack, not to choose one, but merely to feel their weight through the wood and bronze. He stops at the edge of the field and gazes at the distant peaks beyond, where clouds roll and part, unconcerned by strategy or conquest. His shoulders lower, not in defeat, but in release, as if even the god of war has discovered a moment when conflict is not necessary, when power is best left at rest. A nearby bench holds a discarded shield, polished to mirror-like shine, now reflecting the sunlight as a slow pulse of brightness on the stone wall behind it. Ares sits beside it, one hand resting on his knee, the other idly drawing patterns in the dust. He does not train today. He does not command. He merely breathes. In the grove that stretches along the path toward the healing springs, Asclepius, god of medicine, tends to a small patch of herbs growing along a natural spring. The pool glistens in the light, its surface gently rippling with the breath of Olympus itself. He plucks a sprig of chamomile, not for remedy, but because it reminds him of his childhood, of simpler rituals, of knowledge that grew from touch and quiet study rather than divine wisdom. His serpent staff lies at his side, its golden coils glinting softly but unmoving, its head resting as if even it has chosen to rest. A few steps behind him, Hygeia, his daughter and companion, gathers mint leaves into a small woven pouch, her movements methodical but unhurried. They work in silence, not out of fatigue or distance, but in the shared understanding that silence is part of healing too. The breeze carries the scent of clean water and sun-warmed stone, a perfume of ease. Farther up the path, where two archways cross to form a shaded sanctuary, Athena reads from a scroll, though her eyes move slowly across the parchment. It is not war strategy or political counsel, but an old poem, its verses written in flowing, quiet script. She turns each page with care, her fingertips smoothing the edges as though each word is a relic. Her owl sits perched on the edge of the bench beside her, head tucked into its feathers, still half asleep despite the brightness. Athena doesn't disturb it. She smiles faintly at the sleeping bird, then continues reading, not to learn, not to command, but because even wisdom must occasionally return to wonder. In the distance, the great bells of Olympus remain silent. The gods have not yet convened. No thunder rolls. No new laws are drafted. Instead, the world of immortals takes this morning as an offering, one made of gentleness and golden air, one without demand. The flowers bloom quietly in their corners. The fruit on the vines swell in their slow rhythm. Even the wind, which usually curls with messages and news, glides instead through the corridors like a hymn with no words. And so Olympus, with all its power, all its glory, all its myth-making force, continues to exist in a space that defies legend, a place not of grand declarations, but of still presence. Scene by scene, the mountain reminds its dwellers and itself that greatness is not always measured in action. Sometimes it is found in pause. And in this moment, stretched out between sky and stone, morning and memory, Olympus holds its greatness, not in thunder, but in peace. As the sunlight climbs toward its midday peak, Mount Olympus continues to shine with the quiet dignity of a world that has chosen stillness over spectacle, its luminous halls and golden terraces basking in the warmth without rushing into motion. The divine mountain is fully awake now, but not hurried. Rather, it stretches itself slowly through the passage of time, as though determined to hold onto the softness of the night that came before. Near the southern garden steps, beneath a pergola woven with flowering vines of honeysuckle and myrtle, Eros, the god of desire, rests in a hammock strung between two slender cypress trees, his bow set carefully on the ground beside him, the quiver tipped on its side, its arrows spilling like thoughts abandoned mid-dream. He doesn't reach for them. Instead, he watches the shadows of leaves as they play on his bare feet, flickering in shapes that shift with each passing second. A faint breeze stirs his golden hair, and though his eyes are open, they are unfocused, fixed on a place beyond the canopy, beyond the sky, perhaps even beyond Olympus itself. This morning, desire is not chasing or longing or flaring brightly. It is resting. It is remembering what it means to want nothing at all. Beside the stone path leading up toward the temple library, Psyche sits on the steps, her fingers interlaced and her eyes closed. Her breath is steady, and she hums quietly to herself, a low, melodic tune that once comforted her in mortal life. Now, even among gods in eternity, she finds grounding not in power but in sound. Around her, butterflies, her eternal symbol, flit lazily between blooming violets and patches of sun. They do not rush. They do not migrate. They simply stay. Further up the slope, in a chamber shaped like a half-shell carved from alabaster, the Graces lie together on an enormous daybed covered in soft linens, each one wrapped in a light veil of gauze, their arms tangled, their bodies relaxed into one another. Aglaia speaks softly of colors, of how morning light feels different on the skin than afternoon sun. Thalia listens with her eyes half closed, smiling faintly, while Euphrosyne lets her hair fall over her eyes like a curtain. Their closeness is effortless, their peace not performative but true, and they say no more than necessary. Around them the sounds of Olympus are few, a distant chirp, a trickle of water, the rustle of leaves disturbed only by their own growing weight. No divine messenger arrives. No ceremony is called. Not even the stars, though absent from the sky, feel missed. Beyond the open archway near the reflecting pool, Prometheus sits against a low wall, his hands resting palm up on his knees. A vine has crept along his arm, climbing as if seeking warmth, but he does not brush it away. He has not spoken since waking. There is nothing to reveal, nothing to defy. He closes his eyes and leans his head back, the sun catching the edge of his jaw. The fire he once gave to man still burns far below, but today he guards no flame. The warmth here is enough. In the central courtyard, a table has been laid with platters of figs, olives, and warm bread, though no one eats with urgency. Hestia moves slowly among the cushions, straightening things here, adjusting a pitcher there. Her smile is small, enduring, and her eyes rest on each god who passes with wordless affection. She does not ask if they are hungry. She does not encourage or instruct. She simply tends not because it is needed, but because love, when quiet, often looks like this: service without show. Even Dionysus, seated at the far end of the table with a half-full goblet in hand, does not toast or jest. He simply swirls the liquid, watching its slow rotation as though the whole of Olympus might be found in that gentle spin. No laughter breaks the air, but no silence feels empty. Around him, vines curl upward from the base of his chair, blooming slowly into blossoms that open not with drama but with ease. The mountain hums. Its rhythm is not loud, not bold. It is the sound of continuation, of breath drawn in without the need to speak. And so Olympus, radiant in the calm of a full morning, continues its long, gentle unfolding. Each god, each tree, each breath and breeze participates in the slow poem of presence. Here in this sacred stillness, even immortality forgets to reach for anything more than what already is. By the time the sun reaches its zenith and casts a luminous stillness over all of Mount Olympus, the divine mountain glows with a rare and steady fullness, not from the fire of miracles or the pulse of thunder, but from the softness of a world entirely content to be. The marble paths are warm beneath bare feet, and the gardens breathe with the gentle rhythm of midday, a slow exhale shared by trees, birds, gods, and winds alike. In a broad courtyard framed by columns wrapped in flowering ivy, Helios, once the charioteer of the sun, sits with his legs crossed on a raised stone platform, watching the sunlight arc across the floor as though he is a guest in the realm he once ruled. His golden hair shines in the noon light, yet he seems subdued, reflective, even tender. The horses of his celestial chariot rest nearby, no longer galloping through sky or flame, their flanks dappled with light as they sleep beneath the shade of a nearby olive tree. Helios does not summon them. He does not fly. He watches, the light he once carried now moving on its own, perfectly steady, needing no guidance. For once, even the sun itself asks nothing of him. At the far edge of the same courtyard, Eos, the goddess of the dawn, his sister, leans against a pillar, sipping slowly from a cup of nectar. Her gown, normally radiant and trailing with hints of morning fog, hangs loosely around her frame, warmed by the day. She smiles faintly as she tilts her face upward, letting the light she helped summon now kiss her cheeks. For once, she is not opening gates or chasing shadows. She is simply letting the sun continue its course, unhurried, unbothered. Between them, a breeze moves gently across the courtyard, turning a few petals loose from a high branch above, which drift lazily through the air before landing on the sunlit stones. Not far beyond the colonnade, the sound of quiet water trickles from the mouths of 3 lion-headed fountains, their streams catching the light like falling threads of crystal. A group of lesser deities reclines in the grass beyond, resting in the dappled shade of fig and almond trees. They speak softly, if at all, their laughter so quiet it hardly disturbs the bees moving lazily from bloom to bloom. One of them, Astraeus, goddess of gentle healing, wraps a silk ribbon around the wrist of another, not for injury, but as a simple gesture, a reminder that care can be quiet too. The air here smells faintly of thyme and sweet citrus, warmed by the midday light and the stillness of untouched time. In a nearby gallery where tall glass panes cast rainbows across the floor, Iris glides silently across the polished stone, her robes trailing in the same color she once cast across the skies. She is not summoned by storms today. No mortal prayers fly upward in haste. She simply moves in a slow, elegant pattern, her footfalls light as cloud shadow, pausing now and then to tilt her head, listening to something far away, or perhaps to nothing at all. In one of the window seats, a scroll lies open, half read, a ribbon marking the place where the reader fell asleep or wandered off to find a softer sunbeam. The scroll remains unread for now, and nobody minds. Meanwhile, near the entrance to the Hall of Echoes, a chamber where the past often repeats itself in endless murmurs, silence reigns for once. The echoes are asleep, as if even memory is exhausted by its own retellings and has chosen instead to lie down beside the marble walls and dream. No one disturbs it. And all the while, Olympus remains suspended in this radiant pause, not frozen, but flowing in slow motion, as though time itself were walking barefoot through the garden paths, hands behind its back, humming to itself. The gods do not gather yet. No one returns to the throne. No one lifts a scepter. They bask in the understanding that to do nothing is not to waste time, it is to honor it. And so, wrapped in sun and stillness, Olympus continues its quiet day, not in the pages of legend, but in the silence between lines where the sacred breath of rest is written most clearly. As midday quietly matures on Mount Olympus, the mountain no longer rises into morning nor tilts toward evening. It simply floats in a serene and eternal present, where light lingers on every curve of column, every surface of carved stone, every petal that unfurls without audience. The gods remain dispersed throughout their domain, not in states of idleness, but in communion with the world as it exists in its calmest form. Down a winding garden path bordered by golden marigolds and silvery sage, Hecate moves through the dappled shade, not as the guardian of thresholds or the wielder of torches, but as a quiet figure, tracing her way through the sacred in-betweens. Her threefold form, past, present, and potential, walks unified now. No need to split or guide, or choose. Each footstep is silent, absorbed into the soft moss underfoot, and her cloak rustles not with power, but with the whisper of presence. She stops before a stone arch carved with symbols that no longer glow, symbols that once guided crossroads and decisions. Today, they rest. She places her hand upon them, not to awaken them, but simply to feel that they're still there. Still, part of a world that doesn't always need direction. In the sacred aviary perched on the slope overlooking the southern valley, birds of all colors and songs perch quietly, some with eyes closed, some preening slowly, none in flight. Hera stands within the sanctuary, one hand resting gently on the edge of a golden perch, where a white dove leans into her fingers with trust. The Queen of Olympus, so often seen through lenses of majesty or pride, looks not regal now, but human, in her stillness. Soft, maternal, grounded. Her robes catch the breeze slightly, and her eyes follow a single feather drifting lazily through the sunbeams like a thought too delicate to hold. She does not speak, does not summon, does not remind. She simply watches, and the mountain watches with her, further up the hillside at the edge of a cliff where the sky meets the stone in a seamless breath of blue. Morpheus sits beneath an ancient cypress. His wings, folded and luminous, shimmer with the colors of forgotten dreams. Around him, the grass bends in perfect stillness, not from wind, but from the sheer softness of his presence. He carves a pattern into the dirt with a stick, a spiral, endless and meandering, the shape of dreams themselves. He doesn't look at it as he draws. His eyes are closed, his head tilted back toward the heavens, as if he's listening to the dreams that still cling to the air from the long night. Though no one sleeps now, the traces of rest are all around, woven into the soil, etched into the light, echoing in the stillness. Near the reflecting pond, shaped like a crescent moon, Amphitrite, the sea goddess and queen beside Poseidon, wades ankle-deep in water. Though far from the oceans she commands, her presence brings the pond to life with small shimmering ripples that move in perfect harmony with her breath. Her hair trails behind her like sea foam, and she hums an ancient lullaby that has no language, only rhythm. Fish stir slowly beneath the surface, and a lotus opens beside her, blooming in quiet response. She closes her eyes, letting her fingers skim the water's face, and for a moment, Olympus itself seems to listen. Elsewhere, seated on a stone bench beneath a flowering cherry tree that sheds pale petals like drifting parchment, Tyche, the goddess of chance, shuffles a deck of delicate cards. Each bears a symbol: stars, waves, fire, a broken cup. But she doesn't play a game, doesn't cast a fortune. She draws a single card, places it face down, and smiles, as if knowing that today the outcome doesn't matter. Behind her, petals drift down in no particular pattern, settling in her lap, on her hair, into the folds of her gown. The wind moves past, carrying none of them away. And throughout Olympus, the sounds of midday are reduced to the bare essentials: the low buzz of bees in the lavender bushes, the creak of wood expanding in the sun, the occasional flap of wings far above. No declarations are made, no battles remembered, no ceremonies performed. It is a day without shape, without climax, without commentary, a divine interlude where being is more valuable than becoming. And as this sacred stillness stretches its arms wide across the mountain, every god, every spirit, every stone and leaf becomes part of the same unspoken truth: that peace, once chosen, once honored, can be the most powerful myth of all. With the day holding steady in its golden stillness, Mount Olympus continues to dwell in a kind of divine exhale, neither rising toward crescendo, nor falling toward decline, just hovering in that sacred middle where nothing needs to be more than it is. The very air seems to shimmer not from heat but from tranquility, as if the molecules themselves have agreed to move more slowly in deference to the calm. Across the palace's west-facing portico, where ivy creeps silently up sun-warmed columns and the horizon stretches endlessly into the haze of afternoon light, Apollo walks barefoot, his lyre cradled gently in one arm. He is not preparing to perform. The strings are slightly out of tune, and he makes no effort to correct them. Instead, he plucks a few idle notes, soft and discordant, letting them drift out into the sky where they dissolve into silence like forgotten dreams. His footsteps fall with the grace of someone walking through memory rather than space, and his golden robe flutters lightly in the breeze, a thread of sun woven into fabric. Near the edge of the portico, where a carved bench curls around the trunk of an old olive tree, the Horae sit together, their legs tucked beneath them, passing a bowl of honeyed figs from hand to hand. They eat without speaking, their mouths moving slowly, eyes half-lidded, each one watching the shifting patterns of light as they stretch and fade across the stones. Time, their very domain, seems to wait on them now rather than the reverse. The shadow of the tree moves inch by inch across their feet, but no one comments. Beyond them, down a set of shallow marble steps, the main fountain gurgles quietly. The water spills from a lion's mouth, down into a wide basin where lily pads float untouched, casting round shadows like coins on the bottom of a shallow sea. Athena sits on the edge, dipping her hand into the cool water and watching the ripples stretch out in slow circles. Her armor lies folded beside her, polished but unused, and her helmet rests like a sleeping thought at her feet. For now, wisdom does not seek application. It merely observes. She watches the water respond to her presence and thinks not of war or law, but of how peaceful it feels to do nothing at all. Not far from the fountain, the wind carries a faint trace of song, not loud, not deliberate, but the kind of humming one does when completely alone and perfectly content. It comes from Demeter, who is tending to a patch of wildflowers growing along a cracked path. She kneels in the earth, her hands dusty, her fingernails filled with soil, and she smiles down at a daisy that has somehow sprouted between slabs of ancient stone. She doesn't pluck it. She just touches the petals with a reverent fingertip and lets it be. Above her, on a shaded balcony wrapped in vines, Artemis reclines against a cushion-strewn bench, one hand behind her head, the other lazily stroking the fur of a dozing stag curled beside her. Her bow rests across her lap, but the arrows remain in their quiver. She gazes out over the treetops, her expression unguarded and soft. There is no hunt to pursue, no moon to rise, only this view, this moment, this breath. Even her hounds are quiet, stretched out like shadows in the warm light, their ears twitching only occasionally. And elsewhere, unseen but ever present, the mountain itself continues to hum with its quiet pulse, the song of Olympus in repose. It is not the sound of triumph or tragedy, not the echo of prophecy or praise. It is the steady rhythm of divine stillness, of eternal beings choosing presence over performance. The myths do not stir. The scrolls remain rolled. The great hall is empty, and yet everything feels full, filled not with noise but with peace, filled not with movement but with meaning. In this sacred afternoon, Olympus is not a place of action. It is a cathedral of pause, a temple of breath, a story told not through what happens but through what doesn't. And in that silence, in that radiant, unshaken quiet, the gods remember what it means to dwell, not as forces of nature, not as icons of worship, but as beings who, like all others, sometimes need nothing more than sunlight and time. As the sun begins its gentle descent toward the far horizon, casting a mellow golden sheen across the gleaming marble terraces and lush gardens of Mount Olympus, the divine realm seems to settle even further into its state of holy quietude. not diminishing but deepening, as though the day itself has chosen to lean into its own softness. The light now pours sideways through columns and trees, stretching shadows into long ribbons across the floors and footpaths, painting slow-moving reflections onto walls and fountains. In the long colonnade that runs along the palace's eastern wing, Dionysus reclines lazily on a cushioned lounge, half wrapped in a cloak of woven grapevines and linen, his fingers lazily spinning the stem of an untouched goblet. He's surrounded by bowls of fruit, amphorae of wine, and empty chalices, but none of them have been disturbed since morning. His eyes are half closed, not in intoxication, but in something gentler, contentment without demand. The god of revelry has no festival today, no ecstatic cries or wild dances echoing through the halls. There is only the hum of bees in the vineyard beyond the columns, and the slow, rhythmic creaking of vines shifting their weight with the passing breeze. A few leaves drift from above, catching in his curls, but he makes no effort to remove them. Beside him, a young satyr rests with one hoof dipped in a shallow basin of cool water, his reed pipe silent and slung across his chest like an afterthought. They do not speak. The hour does not ask for sound. Nearby, in the orchard where pomegranates and peaches hang heavy on the branches, Persephone walks with a basket in hand but does not pick. Her fingers trail across the fruit skins as though greeting them, her expression far away but not troubled. It is a look that belongs to one who knows both underworld and sky, and finds peace in the place that is neither. She stops beneath an arch of flowering wisteria, watching petals drift down like whispers from the gods who came before even her time. The shadows under her eyes are faint, more like soft ink than burden. She smiles gently at something unseen and moves on without urgency. In the meadows below, the grass glows with a honey-colored light, and the nymphs who dwell there lie sprawled across blankets of moss, their laughter reduced to sighs, their fingers weaving chains of clover and marigold. One plays with the breeze, shaping it between her palms like soft clay, letting it run through her fingers and curl into her hair. Another sleeps with a frog perched on her shoulder, unmoving, as though it, too, has succumbed to the weight of peace. Above it all, in the open observatory, Urania, muse of the heavens, stands before a long table of maps and stellar diagrams, her hands resting on a parchment of the constellations as they will appear tonight. She does not measure or adjust, does not calculate. She merely watches as the sunlight filters through the lens of a great celestial scope, casting a glowing circle upon the floor. In that light, the stars she knows by name wait, quiet and distant, patient as gods. She smiles faintly, then turns away from the sky to admire the day itself, rare and perfect in its stillness. Even the birds, those winged carriers of divine omens, seem quieter than usual. They perch along ledges and statues, blinking into the golden air as though considering what it means to stay instead of soar. Far across the mountaintop, in a temple garden where white lilies bloom in shaded rows, a single harp string vibrates, in the air, struck not by hand but by a stray breeze. The sound is soft, pure, and alone. No one follows it with music. No one turns their head. It simply exists. One clear note suspended in a moment already so full of meaning that nothing more is needed. And all around, Olympus holds steady in this descending light, as though savoring the balance between brightness and dusk, between silence and the soft promise of nightfall. The gods do not rise. They do not vanish. They remain. Here, now, cradled, in gold and warmth, in breath and stillness, in the closing gesture of a day too sacred to rush. As afternoon slowly ripens into the beginning of evening, Mount Olympus leans further into the golden hush that has carried it through the day, each passing hour folding gently into the next like pages in a book that has no urgency to be finished. The sun lowers by degrees, casting long, slanted light across the stone walls and quiet terraces, gilding every surface with the softness of approaching twilight. In the wide stone amphitheater nestled between two hillsides of olive trees, the seats sit empty, the stage untouched since morning. Yet in the center, Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, stands barefoot on the stage, her hands clasped gently behind her back, her gaze turned not to the invisible audience, but to the horizon, beyond the high arches. She recites nothing. Her lips do not move, but her eyes tell the story of silence, how even the grandest tales are born from stillness. A gentle breeze sways her gown, and dust from the stone rises in a soft spiral at her feet before settling, again without sound. She closes her eyes for a moment, listening to the weight of quiet. She stays that way until the sun glints across the top of the amphitheater, catching her hair in a brief blaze of copper and gold. On a balcony above, watching from behind a row of fluted columns, Clio leans against the marble rail, a half-unrolled scroll forgotten beside her. The goddess of history, ever the keeper of memory, now lets her own drift freely, unrecorded. She smiles faintly, not from joy or pride, but from the deep calm that comes when there is nothing to remember and nothing to write. Across the courtyard from her, Melpomene sits beneath a cypress, her tragic mask resting in her lap untouched. For the first time in what feels like centuries, her face shows no sorrow, no performance, only peace. She looks upward at the changing sky, where soft pinks and amber hues begin to take the place of stark blue, and the light is so gentle that even emotion seems to dissolve within it. Down by the pool of Narcissus, the water lies perfectly still, mirroring the twilight without flaw. No ripples, no movement. Narcissus himself sits beside it, gazing not at his reflection, but at the sky reflected in the water's surface. For once he is captivated not by himself but by something larger, quieter, softer. A single leaf lands on the pool and drifts outward in wide, slow circles. He does not disturb it. Elsewhere in the Garden of Eternal Spring, Demeter walks among rows of tall stalks and blossoming vines. She carries no sickle, no basket, no blessing. She walks with her sleeves rolled to the elbow and her fingers trailing through the tall grasses, occasionally stopping to breathe in the scent of basil, rosemary, and freshly warmed soil. The light that filters through the trellises above her bathes her in a dappled pattern of soft golden green. Her sandals are dusted with pollen. Her expression is one of deep gratitude, not dramatic, not spoken, but wholly understood by the land around her. Further uphill, in a chamber lined with old instruments and forgotten scrolls of composition, Apollo sits at a long table where a half-finished song rests beside a quiet lyre. He does not play. He simply taps the table lightly with 2 fingers, creating a rhythm only he can hear. His gaze is distant, unfocused, fixed not on the music but on the shadow slowly lengthening across the page. The notes will come later. The melody will find its shape. But now is not the time for creation. It is the time for the space that must precede it. All across Olympus, the golden silence of late afternoon has deepened into a shared exhale. The gods do not rush to dinner or debate. There is no sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. Even the fountains seem to gurgle more slowly, their waters adjusting to the mood of the sky. The birds, once active and curious, now rest quietly. In alcoves and under eaves, their feathers fluffed, their songs reduced to murmurs. And within every chamber, garden, hallway, and quiet bench, the essence of Olympus breathes through its silence. A breath that carries no message, no meaning beyond itself. Just stillness, stretched wide beneath the fading sun, shared equally, among immortals who for this hour have chosen not to rule, not to be remembered, but only to remain. As evening begins to gently unfurl its veil across the skies of Mount Olympus, the mountain does not resist the changing light, but embraces it with the kind of calm that only a timeless realm can possess, slipping effortlessly from golden glow to dusky warmth. The clouds gather low and lazily along the mountain's edge, their edges tinged in muted pinks and bruised lavender, casting faint, elongated shadows over the wide plazas and vine-draped galleries. High above, on the temple of the skies, Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, appears at last, not with thunder or command, but as a gradual presence, as if she had always been here, waiting just behind the sunlight. Draped in robes darker than the deepest indigo, adorned with stars that flicker faintly even before the true night comes. She stands at the edge of the highest balcony, her gaze sweeping across Olympus with a softness that only darkness can provide. She says nothing. She does not need to. Her arrival marks the transition from day to dream, from motion to hush. Below her, across the descending terraces, a warm hush spreads like a mist. The torches lining the inner corridors flicker to life, not all at once, but slowly, respectfully, as though even flame understands the mood. Their light dances gently on the marble floors, mixing with the last of the sun's rays and creating a moment where two worlds, day and night, coexist in sacred pause. Along the hall of statues, Hestia lights a single lantern and places it on a pedestal, her fingers moving with the kind of reverence that belongs to caretakers and quiet architects of peace. The flame is small, flickering, but steady. She watches, it for a long moment, her expression unreadable, her breath even. Behind her the shadows stretch further into the corridors, but none are feared here. They are part of the cycle, expected, welcome. Not far from her, in a narrow courtyard enclosed by myrtle and rose bushes, Aphrodite steps barefoot into a shallow basin of cool water. She does not bathe in ritual, but simply soaks her feet, standing still, her hair cascading freely down her back. The water catches the deepening sky and mirrors it, reflecting both her and the first faint stars above. She lifts her head and sighs, a slow, content sound, and for a moment even the breeze stills around her. She closes her eyes, not in sorrow or longing, but in complete presence. On the edge of the olive grove, Hermes walks a slow circle around, the base of a wide fig tree, tracing a path that glows faintly with golden dust under his feet. The messenger god, usually a blur of movement and cleverness, now moves as though caught in a slow dance with the mountain itself. In his hand, he holds not a staff but a reed flute, and though he doesn't play it, the wind seems to echo its imagined tune, whistling low and melodic through the leaves. As the light shifts, so too does the energy of Olympus. The gods no longer linger in the same places. They begin to drift, some toward their chambers, others toward the quiet balconies that open to the night sky. They pass one another with nods, soft words, or nothing at all, their movements fluid, unforced. No great meetings are held, no declarations made. There is only the slow retreat from the day, like a tide returning to the sea. Down in the meadows, the nymphs rise from their mossy rest and begin gathering petals and leaves, not as offerings but as simple acts of closure, as if to gently tuck the earth in for sleep. One of them hums an old lullaby, and it spreads like smoke through the warm air, barely above a whisper. The light has turned from gold to amber, from amber to deep rose, and now to twilight's violet edge. Far above Nyx remains, her presence still and unblinking, and around her the first true stars begin to shimmer through the darkening fabric of the sky. They do not fall. They do not twinkle with urgency. They simply appear, quiet and slow, as if they too are reluctant to interrupt such a peaceful evening. And so with each breath, Mount Olympus lowers its voice further, its brilliance softening into a lullaby made of shadows and silver light. No ending is announced. No curtain falls. It is not the conclusion of anything. It is simply night, beginning, as gently as a sigh, wrapping the mountain in velvet hush, reminding even gods that the day need not be conquered to be complete. It only needs to be allowed to pass. As the last remnants of sunlight vanish behind the distant curve of the horizon, Mount Olympus becomes cloaked in a soft indigo dusk, its heights slowly swallowed in shadow and moonlight, its breath no longer golden but silver blue and steady. A sense of still reverence settles over the divine realm, not the hushed awe of ceremony or prophecy, but the kind of deep, grounded quiet that comes only after a long, undisturbed day, when nothing has been forced and everything has simply been. The clouds have drifted lower, tinged now with pale pearl and lavender, barely moving like thoughts just on the edge of sleep. Along the mountain's middle terraces, a quiet procession begins, not of purpose, but of presence, as gods and minor deities, muses and spirits begin their slow migration from open gardens and glowing halls toward the inner sanctums where dreams are cradled and silence is held sacred. Inside a round chamber wrapped in trailing vines and scented with drying lavender, Hypnos, god of sleep, prepares his space. He places a single feather, plucked from his own wing earlier that day, into a shallow bowl of dream water that sits in the center of the room. As it touches the surface, a ripple of pale light echoes outward, not bright but calming, like the last echo of a lullaby remembered from childhood. The room darkens around it, not into blackness, but into a soft cocoon of shadow where nothing sharp remains. Hypnos moves with grace, not speaking, not glancing back at the doorway. The world he ushers in does not need direction. It arrives naturally, as night always does. Above his chamber, on a rooftop garden where olive trees grow in quiet clusters and stars peek gently through the lattice of leaves, Selene, the moon goddess, begins her ascent into the night. She stands barefoot at the edge of a shallow stone basin filled with still water, the first sliver of the moon already visible behind her. Her long silver gown whispers against the stones, and her eyes glimmer like quiet waves under starlight. She does not raise her arms or chant or summon. She merely breathes in the evening and allows herself to rise, her form dissolving slowly into the moonlight, leaving only a faint shimmer behind, like the brush of silk across a pillow. Meanwhile, in the Hall of Muses, once vibrant with afternoon creativity, the instruments now rest quietly on cushions and stands. Calliope's scrolls are rolled and tied with gentle care. Terpsichore's sandals sit beneath her chair, untouched. Even Erato's lyre is silent, cradled in shadow. The Muses do not speak. They lie together on long couches, their heads resting against one another, their eyes growing heavy. There is no audience to dazzle, no bard to inspire. Tonight, their gift is sleep, and they give it by example. Not far from them, in a room lined with celestial charts and drifting motes of light, Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, sits quietly by a pool that reflects not her image, but the events of the day. Not the kind of day mortals recall, full of deeds and speech, but the quiet, uneventful truth of being. The breeze through laurel trees, the golden hush of morning, a fig ripening in the sun. The pool holds all these in gentle layers, and she watches them dissolve one by one into the dream. She does not cry, nor smile, nor speak. Memory, too, must rest. Elsewhere on Olympus, the doors of temples have been left open, their flames still burning but lower now, flickering softly as though whispering to the walls. The wind that had rustled leaves and lifted curtains has slowed to a sigh, and the shadows stretch long and loose across the stone paths. The statues look more alive in this light, not because they move, but because they belong to this hour, silent, eternal, witnessing, and as the mountain continues to fold itself into the fabric of night, even the stars seem slower to blink, more deliberate in their glow. The sky is no longer a ceiling, but a cradle. Olympus is no longer shining. It is swaying, breathing, tucked in beneath the dark. No voices rise, no commands echo. Only the shared stillness of immortal beings choosing, again and again, to let the moment remain undisturbed. The kind of moment where no story must unfold, where presence itself is the only myth left to tell. As true night finally spreads itself fully across Mount Olympus, the mountain exudes a soft luminescence under the gentle dominion of moonlight, its spires and domes glowing not with divine power but with a quiet radiance that feels more like memory than magic. The entire realm seems to have inhaled one long, deep breath, and is now in the middle of an endless, silent exhale. Every leaf, every ripple of cloth, every footstep barely taken, all part of a shared rhythm that requires nothing but stillness. Inside a small circular chamber crowned with a domed ceiling painted with faded stars, Morpheus, god of dreams, sits cross-legged on a woven mat surrounded by a low ring of candles, their flames barely flickering. In his lap rests a book that contains no writing, only blank pages that he gently turns one by one, as if each empty sheet carries the possibility of 1,000 dreams yet unimagined. Around him wisps of mist curl upward, not smoke, not fog, but the first threads of slumber winding their way out into the world. He says nothing, does nothing grand, yet from this very space, the dreams of both mortals and gods begin to take form, not as visions of grandeur or prophecy, but as simple, slow images. The memory of warm bread, the sensation of floating, the echo of a name that was never spoken aloud. In another corner of Olympus, tucked between two tall cypress trees and half hidden beneath a trellis of jasmine, Thanatos, gentle god of peaceful death, reclines in a marble chair that has long since molded itself to the shape of his stillness. He is not grim tonight, nor ominous. In fact, he seems softer than usual, his black cloak draped across his shoulders like a blanket rather than an armor. A small moth perches on his wrist, and he watches it for what feels like hours. The stars glimmer faintly above, mirrored in the reflection of a still pool before him, and every so often he dips his fingers into the water, not to change it, but to feel its coolness, to remember the weight of existence before release. Far above, drifting just beneath the high canopy of the star-strewn sky, Selene rides her silent chariot of moonlight. The silver wheels make no sound on the wind, and the white oxen that draw her are more mist than matter, more suggestion than form. She carries no torch tonight. Her own glow is enough. Below her, shadows move slowly across Olympus, not hiding what they fall upon, but cloaking each detail in reverent pause. She passes over temples, groves, courtyards, and columns, offering each a blanket of quiet that settles like dew. The gods below her do not stir. They welcome the night not as a conclusion, but as a continuation, a deepening of the stillness that has shaped the entire day. Meanwhile, tucked away in a quiet chamber carved into the mountain's inner slope, Hades sits at a stone desk illuminated only by a single ember held within a carved obsidian bowl. His eyes are open, but not alert. His hands rest loosely on the surface before him, fingers interlaced, unmoving. He is not thinking of his kingdom, not counting souls or measuring fates. Tonight, even the Lord of the underworld allows himself to pause. The silence around him is complete, not a fearful void, but a rich and encompassing calm, the kind that exists only when nothing more needs to be said. On the nearby balcony, Persephone stands, watching the moonlight trace delicate paths over the vines she once planted there, now dormant, waiting for another spring. She runs a finger gently along one of the withered stems, then lets her hand fall to her side. She does not mourn it. The night is full enough. Even her gaze, which once looked toward horizons with longing, now rests easily on what is close. In this hour, everything that is here is enough. And so Olympus, blanketed in silver, holds its breath within the peace of its own shadows. The walls do not echo. The statues do not gleam. Even the air itself has thickened into something almost tangible, a velvet hush wrapping every divine figure, every stone, every memory. It is not sleep in the mortal sense, nor rest as humans know it. It is something older, deeper, the sleep of eternity, the pause between myths, the long and sacred stillness that binds all things in reverent quiet. And in this moment, Olympus is not a place of power or spectacle. It is a cradle for breath, a shelter for silence, a story gently closing its eyes. Night has now taken full hold of Mount Olympus, and yet, instead of blanketing the divine realm in darkness, it has transformed it into a sanctuary of silver, quiet, and slow illumination, where every marble step and every winding path glows, faintly beneath the light of countless stars. The mountain seems to pulse with a slow, content rhythm, as if Olympus itself is breathing in sleep, exhaling stillness, letting the long day settle into memory without resistance or urgency. In the garden of eternal twilight, nestled beside the eastern slope where star-shaped flowers bloom only after dusk, Ether, the primordial god of the upper air, stands among the vines, his feet bare against the cool earth, his gaze lifted toward the starlit dome overhead. Around him the flowers slowly open as if drawn to his presence, petals unfolding with no sound, releasing a faint soothing fragrance that lingers in the air like a forgotten lullaby. He does not speak, nor does he reach to touch any of the blossoms. He simply remains, tall, unhurried, a part of the night rather than a master of it. The stars above mirror his gaze, shimmering not with urgency, but with infinite patience, as, though they too have been waiting all day for this soft reunion, not far away, in the narrow passageway between the Hall of Seasons and the Temple of Quiet Things, a lone oil lamp flickers beside a stone basin filled with moon water. Hebe, goddess of youth, kneels beside it, holding a polished ladle carved from pearl and bronze. She gently pours a scoop of water back into the bowl, over and over, watching the ripples expand and vanish. There is no ritual in this act, no need for interpretation. It is simply a way of listening, of watching, of staying awake inside the quiet. Her face, usually lit with youthful brightness, now holds a softness that only deep night can bring, the kind of serenity that comes not from sleep but from stillness that runs so deep it becomes sacred. Across the wide plaza, beneath the columns where ivy has crept skyward and the breeze carries the sound of distant lyres no longer playing, the god Pan strolls alone. His pipes are slung over his shoulder, untouched, and his usual wild joy is softened into something quieter, like a wild field that has gone still beneath snow. His hooves click gently on the cool stone, and he pauses often to peer into the shadows, not with suspicion, but with wonder. He touches the leaves with his fingertips, traces the cracks in the ancient marble, and occasionally looks skyward to where the stars form shapes he no longer names aloud. The wild, too, sleeps eventually. Beneath one of the starlit terraces, tucked between two silent statues, the Hesperides gather around a slow-burning brazier. They speak in whispers too soft to follow, their hands moving through bowls of dried fruit and crushed herbs. They wear robes the color of night wine and twilight mist, and their laughter, barely more than breath, feels as though it has been wrapped in velvet. They do not speak of the golden apples. They do not guard anything tonight. They are simply together, savoring the hour that asks for nothing but presence. High in the domed observatory where celestial maps stretch across the walls and the floors are polished to a mirror shine, Astraeus, the god of dusk and stars, draws his fingers gently across a constellation diagram etched in silver and stone. He does not revise it. He does not trace new paths. He just watches as the stars above align with the lines below, and something wordless passes through him, an understanding that all things are as they must be. Behind him, soft footsteps echo as Eos appears, not in her morning gold, but in her night blue robe, her hair unbound, her light dimmed in preparation for the hours that still remain. She does not speak to Astraeus. They stand side by side, looking outward into the black and silver world. And all throughout Olympus, a hush even deeper than before settles into every crevice and corner. The gardens no longer sway. The water no longer ripples. Even the very air seems to hold its breath. It is not a silence of absence, but of fullness, as if all the gods, all the myths, all the memories and moments are gathered here now, wrapped in the fabric of the night, choosing simply to stay still. Nothing more needs to happen. No miracle needs to unfold. Olympus has already given its breath to the day. Now it rests in its own quiet myth, a place not of power or fear or awe, but of peace that asks nothing but to be shared. Now firmly, held in the arms of night, Mount Olympus has become something even the gods rarely speak of aloud, a realm not of thunder or glory, but of pure repose, where every echo has faded into memory, and every flicker of torchlight glows not for spectacle, but simply to gently hold back the dark. The sky above is a deep, infinite navy, studded with quiet constellations that seem to blink more slowly as though in rhythm with the breath of the mountain itself. Stars do not fall. They simply stay, suspended in their sacred watch, illuminating. Nothing in particular, just offering presence, a kind of celestial companionship to the realm below. In one of the outer sanctuaries far from the main palace, where the walls are carved directly into the rock and adorned with ancient mosaics of mythic tales long since forgotten by mortal ears, Themis, goddess of divine order, sits alone at a round table with no scrolls, no laws, and no scales. Her eyes, usually steady with judgment, are now half-lidded in contemplation. She is not weighing fate tonight. She is not deciding outcomes. Instead, she listens to the wind as it moves, through the latticework, to the silence as it presses softly against the stone, to the absence of urgency. Her hands rest palm down on the table as if holding the stillness in place. Nearby, a small lantern flickers gently, its glass sides etched with the image of olive branches and sleeping lions. The flame inside is steady, not bright enough to dominate the room, but just enough to keep the shadows from becoming too absolute. It hums softly as if it too knows it must not disturb the balance. Outside, beneath the shadow of an ancient fig tree whose roots have wrapped themselves lovingly around a cluster of marble steps, Leto reclines on a stone bench, her eyes fixed not on the stars, but on the slow curl of mist rising from the valley below. She has no words tonight, no instructions, no prayers to answer. Her twin children, Apollo and Artemis, are somewhere else in the vastness of Olympus, and for the first time in ages, she does not feel the pull of motherhood, only the warmth of memory and the soft permission to be still. A soft hoot from an unseen owl breaks the silence gently, and she smiles, not surprised, as if the sound were expected in the way one waits for a breeze to find a window. In a nearby atrium bathed in moonlight, a harp has been left unattended by a sleeping muse, and now the strings vibrate slightly as the cool night air weaves between them. The notes do not form a melody, just isolated tones, spread apart by long silences, like distant stars in sound. No one listens actively, but the music finds its way into dreams regardless. It does not seek attention, not seek attention. It drifts like fog across Olympus, joining the scent of myrrh and old books that lingers in the quiet libraries. In one such library, deep within the temple of written silence, books line the walls from floor to ceiling, and not a single page is turned. The gods do not read tonight. Instead, Mnemosyne, mother of the Muses, sits in a wide-backed chair, a thick velvet blanket draped across her lap. She does not need to open the books to know their contents. Memory sits inside her like a steady flame, and tonight she lets it dim to embers, allowing even the past to rest. The candles in the room have burned low, their wicks curled inward, no longer striving for light. The air here feels padded, like wool, soft, still, dense with rest. Further out, in the high meadow, where wild thyme and sleeping poppies grow, beneath tall pines, a group of minor forest spirits lies curled together beneath the boughs. Their hair is tangled with leaves, and their skin smells of bark and moss. One of them murmurs in her sleep, and the others shift only slightly, arms draped over one another in a communal huddle. Above them, stars twinkle through the spaces between. Branches and a slow wind moves just enough to lift a few fallen petals, spinning them lazily in the dark before setting them gently down. And all throughout Olympus there is no task, no movement, no need. The great halls are empty but warm, the staircase is quiet but swept clean, the altars untouched but glowing faintly from within. It is not emptiness, it is fulfillment. It is not slumber out of weariness, but out of completeness. Nothing more must be added, nothing more must be said. Olympus, in this moment, is not a mountain of gods, but a cathedral of rest, where each divine being, each echo of myth, each whisper of eternity, finds its place in the silence and chooses, simply, to stay. As the night deepens and wraps itself fully around Mount Olympus like a cloak woven from starlight and centuries of myth, even the timeless pulse of divine thought seems to slow, settling into a rhythm too quiet to name. The mountain is now entirely transformed, a glowing silhouette against a sky so velvet dark it seems to absorb even the shimmer of constellations. The heavens are fully opened above, and the stars shine with a patient hush, casting their gentle gaze down onto temples and gardens, domes and columns, where no sound echoes and no voice stirs. On the slope where once thriving vineyards curl along carved terraces, now empty and asleep beneath the night, Dionysus reclines alone beneath a lattice of dormant grapevines. He leans back into a woven hammock strung between two cedar trees, a clay goblet resting in the crook of his arm, untouched and half filled with watered wine. He is not drunk, not even tired in the way mortals know weariness. He is simply still. Around him, the vines rustle faintly in the breeze, their branches clicking softly as if they too are whispering stories not meant for waking minds. His eyes are open but unfocused, watching nothing in particular, perhaps tracing the paths of stars or following the slow arc of a moth circling above him. Not far away, in a stone courtyard whose floor is inlaid with an ancient spiral mosaic, representing the endless unfolding of time, Kronos, embodiment of time itself, walks in silent circles, bare feet making no sound on the cool stone. He walks not to measure or to count, but merely to feel the flow of hours as they pass unnoticed. He does not look to the stars for navigation. He does not carry a clock or a staff. His only companion is the quiet, and it follows him like a shadow. Each step he takes feels like a breath within the lungs of Olympus itself. Every rotation he completes is like a heartbeat echoing in slow motion across the mountain. In a nearby alcove carved into the hillside, tucked behind low-hanging ivy and fragrant night-blooming jasmine, Hecate sits cross-legged beside a gently flickering flame encased in a crystal lantern. She places no offerings at her feet, casts no spells, and opens no gates. Tonight, the goddess of thresholds simply keeps vigil, not as a guardian, but as a presence. Her threefold image, usually seen in triplicate shadow or flame, is unified and calm, her face illuminated by the soft, amber glow that seems to hover in midair more than burn. Her dogs are nowhere to be seen, resting elsewhere perhaps, and her torches are unlit. She is not watching the crossroads tonight, only the space in between breath and dream. High above her, on the cloudless summit where the air is thinnest, and the winds speak only in the subtlest of sighs, Zeus and Hera sit side by side in silence. No throne room surrounds them, no crown adorns their heads. They are wrapped in shared quietude, watching the slow rise of mist from the valley below. Zeus has no lightning bolt in hand, no decree on his lips. Hera holds no scepter, no veil of command. Their fingers rest gently near each other, not touching, but close enough that the warmth between them could be mistaken for light. They exchange no words. Their power does not demand it. The stars above them blink slowly as though listening to a story told long ago and remembered still. In the chamber of forgotten songs, deep within the mountain's heart, an old harp begins to hum without, strings being plucked, its sound resonating through the stillness like a sigh remembered from some ancient cradle. The vibrations pass through the stone, up the columns into the floorboards and ceiling beams, where they dissolve into the fabric of Olympus like water into sand. The melody is not one of triumph, nor of lament. It is a lullaby, eternal and untraceable. Perhaps born from the mountain itself, or perhaps left behind by the first god who ever dreamed. And so Olympus lies under the full cover of night, not asleep, but resting in perfect sacred stillness. No torches are lit anew, no scrolls are unrolled, no chariots ride across the stars. Every corner of this divine sanctuary hums with a hush that feels older than sound, deeper than silence. A hush that needs no audience, no interpretation, no applause. This is not the conclusion of the day nor the foreshadow of the next. It is the moment between, suspended, honored, and gently glowing. And within it, every god, every stone, every blade of moonlit grass is united not by myth or memory, but by the sheer, sublime act of simply being. As the eternal night unfurls to its fullest bloom over Mount Olympus, the divine realm now breathes with a serenity so complete, so delicately balanced, that even time seems hesitant to pass too quickly, as though it too has surrendered to the hush. The sky is ink dark, but soft, a velvet tapestry where stars are not pinpoints of brightness, but small, steady companions that linger quietly above domes and columns, statues and cypress trees. The moon hovers in full bloom, bathing everything in its cool, forgiving light. Marble gleams gently beneath it. Pools reflect its face without a ripple, and even the shadows cast are smooth-edged and pale. The mountain, so often the stage of legend and thunder, now exists as though it were made solely for this moment of rest. Inside the quiet cloister of the Temple of Harmony, Euterpe, the muse of music, sits beside a low marble fountain where water trickles at a pace that seems slower than usual, each droplet echoing faintly before being swallowed by silence. Her instrument lies across her lap untouched. There is no need to play. Music tonight is not found in melody but in breath, in the gentle weight of an arm resting against stone, in the unhurried beat of a heart not asked to hurry. Her eyes are closed. Her thoughts wander slowly through fields of memory and gentle sounds, where notes are soft like feathers and lyrics are born from silence itself. A breeze moves through the temple, lifting her hair and bringing with it the scent of lemon blossoms and cool stone. She smiles without opening her eyes, as if the air itself has told her something worth remembering. Outside in the silver garden where moonflowers bloom only under the full light, a group of dryads, spirits of the trees, sit in a circle, their gowns the same color as the bark they once hid within. They do not dance tonight. They do not sing. They lean gently against one another, eyelids heavy, hands clasped loosely in their laps. One of them hums a sound so low and slow it seems more like the purring of a forest than a song. The others listen, not to be entertained, but to be carried further into calm. Even the leaves above them have stilled, suspended mid-quiver as though nature itself is listening. Down a winding corridor made of woven vines and glowing stone, where lanterns hang like captured stars, Iris, the goddess of the rainbow, glides silently with bare feet that barely touch the ground. She leaves behind no trail of color, no streaks of brilliance, only a feeling, a sense that everything she passes becomes a little more whole, a little more at ease. Her robe moves like mist, and her hair, glowing faintly with refracted light, trails behind her like a whisper. She carries no message tonight. She needs deliver no dreams. Her presence is the message. Be still and let the night hold you. Deep in the Hall of Whispers, a long room carved from pale marble and adorned with statues of poets and prophets, Echo leans against a pillar, listening, not to conversation, but to the memory of sound that once passed through the room. There is nothing to repeat tonight, nothing to reflect. She does not speak nor echo, but simply listens as silence tells its own story. Her form is faint, more suggestion than shape. Her presence felt like a breath on the back of the neck or a thought you nearly forgot. And in this moment, even she rests. Beyond the halls and temples, at the edge of Olympus where the divine gives way to the mortal world below, a single staircase descends into clouds. No one walks it. It stands unused, a bridge between realms wrapped in mist. The stars above it blink slower here, and the wind is a hush. A lantern at the top burns with a soft violet flame, and a lone owl perches on its wrought iron arm, blinking once every so often, as if guarding the passage between waking and dream. It does not hoot. It simply remains. And Olympus itself, that vast sanctuary of divine presence and mythic memory, does not stir. Not even the smallest sound breaks the spell that night has cast. The gods are not absent. They are simply not needed in the way they usually are. They are still woven into the mountain itself, into its stone and breath and sky. The world has not ended. The tale has not paused. It continues, softly, silently, like a stream beneath ice, like the pulse within sleep. The myths rest, not because they are forgotten, but because they are full, complete, content to wait. And in this rare, sacred stillness, Mount Olympus ceases to be a realm of gods and becomes, for a moment, something far more elusive and beautiful. A resting place for peace, gently suspended in time, glowing softly beneath an endless sky. As the hour grows deeper and the veil of night thickens over Mount Olympus, the divine mountain settles even further into its silent, sacred rhythm, where not even the softest breeze dares to rush, and every shadow moves with the grace of ancient dreams. The stars above now seem fixed, no longer twinkling with urgency, but resting in place like eternal sentinels, their quiet glow gently pouring over the sleeping realm. The air has grown cooler, not with the chill of discomfort, but with the refreshing clarity that only true night can offer, a crispness that sharpens silence into something tangible, as if the mountain itself were wrapped in a silken hush. In the secluded sanctuary of thought, where philosophers and muses once wandered beneath flowering arches in search of truths, Athena stands motionless beside a reflecting pool that mirrors not her form, but the constellation of her namesake, owl glittering high above. She wears no helmet. Her shield rests untouched against a pillar. There is no war in her posture, no planning in her eyes. Instead, her gaze is calm, even soft, as she studies the rippling surface of the pool, watching how a single leaf lands upon it and shifts the stars reflected there. She does not move to stop it. She merely observes, as though this simple act, this floating leaf disturbing the cosmos, is a kind of lesson even she has not yet mastered. Her owl rests quietly on the branch above her, its eyes wide and unmoving, a perfect mirror of her own thoughtful stillness. Not far from her in the grove of inner flame, Prometheus sits on a low stone bench carved into the hillside, his hands gently cupped around a small flickering flame he keeps cradled like a fragile bird. He has no chains tonight, no punishment, no burden. The fire does not burn to enlighten or to defy. It simply exists, casting a warm orange glow against his weathered face, a face that tonight carries no suffering, only peace. The warmth of the flame flickers gently onto the nearby tree trunks, turning their bark golden, and for a moment, the grove feels like a forgotten hearth, where gods and mortals alike might gather to share silence instead of words. Elsewhere, high in a tower lined with crystalline panes that reflect both moonlight and memory, Helios, titan of the sun, sits quietly watching the faraway edge of the sky, where night remains unbroken, waiting for no command. He does not rise to prepare his chariot. The horses sleep in their stables below, unmoving, untethered. His golden hair falls loosely around his shoulders, and in his lap rests a scroll of sun paths, rolled and untouched. Tonight there is no need to draw the day forward. He simply waits, not in anticipation, but in acceptance, watching as the night continues to unfold, vast and unhurried. Behind him, shelves filled with light crystals pulse faintly, each one a captured dawn from days long past, now glowing just enough to illuminate the stillness of his vigil. Across the mountain, at the sea balcony where soft winds once brought the scent of distant oceans, Aphrodite, goddess of the sea, leans against the balustrade with her eyes closed, listening not to the crashing of waves, but to the lull of silence that stretches even to the sea below. Her dress moves like water, and her fingers trail gently across the stone as though she is touching the surface of a sleeping ocean. Beside her, a seashell hums quietly in the breeze, and its tone carries the suggestion of tides too slow to disturb the night. She smiles faintly, perhaps recalling something ancient, or perhaps nothing at all, just letting the quiet fill the spaces left by centuries of sound. And beyond even her perch, in the clouds that drift lazily between Olympus and the mortal world, the fates rest at last, their great loom standing still, threads slack but unbroken, the tapestry of time suspended mid-weave. Clotho's hand rests gently against her spindle, Lachesis' fingers lie curled beside her measuring rod, and Atropos, the cutter, has laid her shears in a basket of moss and fallen petals. Their eyes are closed. Their breaths are slow. Even destiny, it seems, has been granted a night of pause, and so Olympus, cradle of gods, stage of myth, eternal dwelling of power, continues to hold this long, deep breath, floating not above the world tonight, but within a realm of its own, not asleep, not watching, simply being. It is a place suspended in the very heart of stillness, where every whisper of the past, every flicker of legend, and every divine sigh has woven itself into a blanket of perfect peace. The mountain does not shine, it glows. It does not echo, it listens. And within its quiet heart, the myths do not unfold. They rest, one beside another, wrapped in the velvet folds of the calmest night the world has ever known. As the stars drift ever so slowly across the vault of heaven, their steady glimmer casting soft patterns on the slumbering heights of Mount Olympus, the divine mountain reaches a stillness so complete, so woven into the fabric of the night, that even the soft rustle of ivy along a stone wall seems purposeful, like the final punctuation on a whispered lullaby. The mountain no longer watches. It dreams. Everything, every leaf, every chamber, every statue appears bathed in a silvery stillness. as though Olympus itself has transformed into a memory preserved within moonlight. In the upper courtyard of the Temple of Repose, Hemera, goddess of the day, sits alone in a stone alcove draped with vines of pale blue flowers that only bloom beneath starlight. She is not cloaked in radiance tonight, nor do her eyes gleam with the brightness of morning. Her golden hair falls in gentle waves down her back, unbound and quietly illuminated by the glow of a lantern beside her. Her hands rest calmly in her lap, her expression free from the anticipation of dawn. For once, she does not look toward the east. Instead, she gazes toward the night sky, allowing herself to simply exist in the realm her essence so rarely touches. The moment holds no irony, only balance. Day witnessing night not to conquer or chase it away, but to share in its rest. A few steps below, nestled in a quiet chamber where the stone walls are painted with faded murals of ancient seasons, Persephone reclines on a cushioned bench near a gently bubbling fountain carved in the shape of blooming pomegranates. Her sandals are removed, her feet dipped into the cool water as her fingers slowly trace the folds of her violet gown. There is no underworld in her eyes tonight, no burden of return, no sorrowful echo of mortality. Only calm. She hums to herself a tune without words, a melody passed down from some forgotten spring, letting it swirl lazily with the fountain's rhythm. Across the room, a single olive branch rests in a tall vase, its leaves perfectly still, as if respecting the hush that surrounds her. High on the northern cliffs where the wind usually howls like distant thunder, there is no sound tonight, only the slow drift of air that smells of pine and cooling rock. Here Boreas, god of the north wind, stands still with his eyes closed, his great cloak motionless, his wild strength subdued into a silent vigil. For once, he is not rushing through the skies or bending trees. He is present, breathing in the sacred softness of a moment he so rarely experiences. Below him, a cluster of snowdrops glows faintly in the moonlight, blooming in quiet tribute to his rare calm. Even the very rock beneath his feet seems to lean into his presence, holding him as much as he has always held the winds. Elsewhere, deep within the cavern of quiet thought, where the ceiling sparkles with flecks of quartz and the floor is soft with moss, Moros, the personification of fate and doom, sits at the center of a circle of unlit candles. But tonight, there is no foretelling, no weighty proclamations, no whispers of destiny's shadows. Moros rests with his back against the stone wall, arms folded loosely, head tilted to one side, as if listening to a silence older than prophecy. His breath is slow, his presence less a warning and more a reflection, a quiet reminder that even inevitability may lie down and pause for breath. Far above, at the celestial observatory where time and sky converge in infinite patterns, Urania, muse of the stars, lies on her back atop a smooth marble platform, a scroll of constellations unfurled beside her. Her eyes are open but unfocused, her hand resting lightly atop the diagrams she will not read tonight. The stars she once charted now simply look back, unmeasured, ungrasped, yet utterly familiar. Her lips part just slightly, not in awe, not in calculation, but in quiet communion, a still moment shared between a soul and the cosmos it understands intuitively. Around her, the constellations begin to shift, not because she directs them, but because they too are part of this slow and sacred unfolding. Back in the heart of Olympus, the central flame, once a beacon of divine power and presence, now burns low in the great hall. Its light flickers gently across the empty thrones, casting long shadows on the polished floor, each one stretching and softening like memories settling into sleep. No gods walk the halls, no pronouncements echo from above. Only the fire remains, a single tongue of light that holds the weight of countless centuries in its steady glow. And so, in this 40th unfolding of a quiet scene, Olympus reveals not another act of myth but the graceful continuation of peace. The mountain does not seek to rouse or impress. It simply offers this moment, like a cup of still water held out in the dark. And if one were to stand there now, breathing in the silence, eyes open to the silver sky, they would find no gods rushing to greet them, only the knowledge that even immortality must rest, and that in this long and quiet night, everything sacred lies in stillness, held gently in the hands of time. As the deepest hours of night settle over Mount Olympus, the mountain becomes a realm suspended in perfect stillness, where even the faintest breath seems to ripple through the air like a secret, shared only with the stars. The sky above is a vast canvas of midnight blue, embroidered with countless pinpricks of light that flicker not with urgency, but with patient calm, each star a silent guardian watching over the slumbering gods below. The marble temples, and silent, colonnades reflect the moon's gentle glow, casting soft silver patterns that dance slowly across floors and statues, as if the mountain itself is breathing in the quiet. In the heart of the palace, within a circular chamber lined with ancient tapestries woven from threads of forgotten myths, Morpheus, the god of dreams, rests upon a low, cushioned divan, his eyes closed but serene. Around him, wisps of dream mist curl lazily, weaving between the pillars and floating toward the open windows that frame the night sky. His hands rest lightly on his lap, fingers twitching faintly as the dreams of mortals and immortals alike drift softly through his realm. He does not shape them tonight. He lets them flow freely, unbound and gentle like whispers carried on a midnight breeze. Nearby, Hypnos, the god of sleep, lies stretched across a broad marble bench, his wings folded neatly behind him. His breath is steady, slow and deep, syncing with the rhythm of the mountain's quiet pulse. His presence is felt, rather than seen, a comforting shadow that cradles the palace in rest. Not far from them, Selene rides her moon chariot across the darkened heavens, her silver light casting an ethereal glow on the gardens and fountains below. She moves without haste or fanfare, her pale gown trailing like mist, her eyes reflecting the vast stillness of the night. As she passes over olive groves and shaded terraces, the leaves whisper softly, stirred by her gentle passage. On a balcony overlooking the sea of clouds that envelop the mountain's base, Zeus and Hera stand side by side, their figures cloaked in shadows, but connected by the quiet strength of shared presence. Neither speaks. Their silence is a conversation, deeper than words, a bond forged not in thunder or decree, but in the peaceful understanding that comes only with long years and shared nights like this. Below them, the great hearth of Hestia burns low, a steady flame that neither flickers nor fades. The fire's warmth fills the hall, touching every corner with a gentle light that soothes and comforts. No offerings are made tonight. No prayers are spoken. The flame burns simply because it is part of the mountain's breath, a steady heartbeat in the vast stillness. Elsewhere, the Muses gather quietly in the shadowed galleries, their faces serene, their voices hushed into whispers or silent song. They do not inspire today. They simply listen to the soft sounds of night, the distant call of an owl, the gentle rustle of petals falling, the murmur of stars drifting through the heavens. And as the night deepens, the mountain itself seems to fold into a deeper calm, its ancient stones soaking in the silence like warm earth after rain. Olympus is not asleep, but it is at rest, a sacred pause in the endless flow of myth and legend, a moment where even immortality allows itself the grace of stillness. In this quiet hour, the gods are not gods, but beings who, like all, find peace in the simple act of being present, breathing slow and letting the world dream around them. As the quiet night stretches onward over Mount Olympus, the mountain seems to pulse with a timeless breath, a slow, steady rhythm that carries the weight of countless ages, yet feels as fresh and gentle as the cool night air itself. The stars above are scattered like a delicate sprinkle of silver dust, their light soft and unwavering, casting a peaceful glow over marble temples, winding staircases, and silent gardens where shadows weave intricate patterns beneath olive trees and cypresses. In the tranquil courtyard of the Hall of Wisdom, Metis, goddess of deep thought and counsel, sits alone on a stone bench carved with ancient runes. Her gaze is fixed not on any scroll or artifact, but on the delicate pattern of moonlight filtering through the leaves above, dancing slowly across the polished floor. Her hands rest loosely in her lap, fingers tracing invisible symbols as if communicating with the very air itself. There is no urgency in her expression, no pressing need for answers, only a serene acceptance of the moment's stillness. Nearby, a small pool mirrors the sky perfectly, its surface unbroken except for the occasional ripple when a soft breeze stirs fallen petals across its face. Across the pool, the faintest scent of jasmine and thyme drifts through the air, mingling with the cool breath of night and wrapping the space in a subtle embrace. In a secluded alcove filled with soft cushions and shaded by flowering vines, the three Graces, Gaia, Euphrosyne, and Thalia, rest together, their arms intertwined and their faces softened by the gentle darkness. Their usual laughter is replaced by quiet sighs, and their glowing robes shimmer faintly in the moonlight as they share the comfort of companionship without words. Each of them seems wrapped in her own thoughts, yet deeply connected by the shared silence like a single thread woven through three hearts. Further along the moonlit paths, Hermes strolls slowly, his winged sandals carried in one hand rather than worn, his steps light as a whisper on the stone. His usual mischievous grin is softened into a thoughtful smile, and his eyes reflect the constellations overhead as he moves without hurry or destination. Occasionally he pauses to trace shapes in the air, weaving invisible messages for no one and everyone, letters made of light and shadow that vanish as quickly as they appear. Above, the moon sails higher, casting a silver path across the quiet gardens and the tranquil fountains that ripple gently with the night's breath. Selene's presence is felt rather than seen, a cool glow that washes softly over the mountain, touching every leaf and column with delicate light. In the farthest reaches of Olympus, where the mountain meets the sky in endless horizons, Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, moves slowly through the darkened groves, her cloak flowing behind her like a river of stars. She does not speak, nor summon, nor command. She simply exists, a guardian of the night's mysteries and keeper of the sacred silence that blankets the world below. Around her the shadows deepen, yet they are not threatening but protective, a gentle cocoon that holds the mountain and all its inhabitants in peace. And so, throughout the vast and timeless realm of Olympus, the gods rest, not in slumber but in presence, not in absence but in attentive calm. The night carries them softly, a lullaby woven from the very essence of stillness, a moment without beginning or end. Here in the embrace of darkness and light, power yields to peace and myth yields to the quiet grace of simply being. As the night deepens over Mount Olympus, the mountain settles further into a gentle, unbroken silence that stretches across every marble pillar and ivy-draped terrace, wrapping the realm in a blanket of calm so profound it feels almost sacred. The stars above hang low and steady, their soft light weaving silver threads through the dark canopy, illuminating statues and sacred groves with a quiet, otherworldly glow. In a secluded garden enclosed by white stone walls, surrounded by blossoming jasmine and night-blooming roses, Eos, the goddess of dawn, now resting before her morning return, leans against a flowering trellis, her eyes closed and her breath slow and even. Her usually radiant hair flows freely, catching the moonlight like threads of spun silver, and her delicate hands cradle a single pale rose, its petals soft and fragrant. She does not speak nor move. She simply exists in the serene space between night and the coming day, savoring the stillness before her inevitable rise. Nearby, in the shadowed corridors of the palace, the Muses sit in a circle, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of a single candle placed at the center. Calliope, Clio, and Melpomene exchange no words, their usual inspiration paused in favor of quiet companionship. Their eyes close one by one as the flame flickers and dances, casting long shadows that ripple gently along the walls like whispered memories. Across the courtyard, beneath an ancient olive tree whose gnarled branches twist skyward like the arms of forgotten dreams, Athena stands alone, her shield resting against the trunk and her helmet set aside. She gazes upward, her expression thoughtful, yet softened by the night's peace, contemplating not war or wisdom tonight, but the simple grace of presence. Her owl perches silently on a nearby branch, its eyes reflecting the starlight without movement or sound. In the deeper gardens where the herbs grow thick and fragrant, Demeter walks slowly among the patches of rosemary and sage, her hands trailing, lightly over the leaves as if gathering the scent of rest itself. She pauses to touch a sprig of lavender, inhaling deeply, the faintest smile touching her lips, a silent prayer for peace, whispered only to the earth beneath her feet. At the highest balcony of the palace, where the air thins and the stars seem close enough to touch, Zeus and Hera stand side by side, their figures silhouetted against the vast night sky. Neither speaks. Their hands brush briefly in a gesture of quiet solidarity, a shared moment of stillness amid the eternal rhythms of power and fate. Below them, the great hearth of Hestia burns low, its steady flame casting a soft amber glow that seems to pulse gently with the heartbeat of Olympus itself. No words are spoken here, no actions taken, just the gentle, constant light, a symbol of home, of sanctuary, of enduring peace. And so, through the sacred halls, the whispering gardens, and the shimmering skies of Mount Olympus, a profound stillness reigns. The gods are not merely resting, they are holding space for something beyond time and myth, a moment of pure being, where stories pause and silence speaks, and the eternal mountain breathes in harmony with the stars. In the deep embrace of night, Mount Olympus rests beneath a sky sprinkled with countless stars that shimmer softly, like distant memories woven into the fabric of the cosmos. The mountain's ancient stones cool under the gentle touch of moonlight, their surfaces bathed in silver luminescence that wraps the sacred halls, whispering gardens and winding paths in an otherworldly glow. In a quiet glade surrounded by tall laurels and fragrant jasmine, Demeter moves slowly, her footsteps light upon the soft earth, her presence a calming balm in the stillness. She carries no burden of harvest or renewal tonight, no call to action or command. Instead, she breathes in the cool night air, her hands lightly touching the petals of night-blooming flowers, feeling the delicate pulse of life even in darkness. Nearby, Persephone reclines beneath a canopy of stars, her gaze lifted gently toward the heavens as a soft breeze weaves through her hair. The pomegranate she once held so tightly now rests forgotten at her side, its seeds quiet, its power subdued in this moment of peace. She smiles faintly, a quiet acceptance radiating from her being, as she surrenders to the tranquil rhythm of a night. On a marble bench by a still reflecting pool, Athena sits with her eyes closed, her shield and helmet set aside, symbols of war and wisdom resting gently beside her. Her breathing is even and slow, synchronized with the soft ripples of water as a single leaf drifts across the surface. The owl perched nearby watches silently, its gaze steady and serene, as if guarding both the goddess and the sacred calm that envelops them. Elsewhere, in the shadowed corridors of the palace, Hermes moves quietly, his footsteps barely audible against the polished floors. His winged sandals are carried delicately in one hand, and his usual mischievous smile is softened into a look of contemplation. He pauses to watch the flickering flames of a solitary lantern, their dance casting gentle shadows that stretch and contract with the rhythm of the night. His thoughts drift unhurriedly, untethered from the duties of messenger or trickster, embraced, instead, by the simple presence of this still hour. High above on the summit, Selene sails slowly across the midnight sky in her chariot drawn by glowing oxen, whose forms shimmer like woven mist. Her silver light cascades over the mountain, touching every leaf, every statue, every silent temple with a blessing of quiet and rest. She does not call forth dreams or cast shadows. She simply flows with the night, a luminous thread weaving the tapestry of darkness and peace. In the great hall, the central hearth burns low under Hestia's watchful gaze, its gentle flame casting a warm, steady glow that seems to breathe with the mountain itself. No offerings are made tonight, no prayers uttered. The flame burns simply to hold space, a constant presence in a world of change, a reminder of home and sanctuary amid the vastness of eternity. And so, throughout the sacred expanse of Olympus, the gods rest wrapped in moonlight and silence. The tales of heroism and strife pause like pages in an ancient book, the voices of legend softened into a collective breath, held gently between the stars. In this profound stillness, Olympus reveals its deepest truth. not as a realm of power and myth, but as a sanctuary of presence, where the greatest story told is that of quiet endurance, and where the most sacred act is simply to be. As the quiet hours deepen over Mount Olympus, the mountain becomes a sanctuary of shadow and gentle light, where even the softest breeze feels like a whispered secret shared between gods and stars. The night sky stretches endlessly above, a vast canvas dotted with silver constellations that glow steadily without haste or flicker, bathing the marble terraces, ancient statues, and flowering groves in a serene, ethereal glow. In a secluded courtyard framed by olive trees and soft moss, Apollo reclines silently, his golden hair catching the moonlight like strands of spun light. His lyre rests untouched at his side, the strings silent in this hour of peace. He gazes upward, not with the fire of the sun god, but with a calm reverence for the night's stillness, as if listening to a melody only the stars can sing. Nearby, the Muses gather quietly around a low stone table, their usual vibrant energy subdued into a gentle presence. Clio's fingers trace patterns in the air, weaving invisible stories that shimmer and fade without sound. Terpsichore leans back against a marble column, her eyes half closed, her breath slow and even. No words are spoken, no songs are sung. Instead, their shared silence becomes a symphony of calm that fills the space between them like soft, lingering notes. In the gardens where wildflowers bloom under the moon's tender light, Demeter walks slowly, her hands brushing the petals of night-blooming roses and lavender. Her expression is peaceful, her steps unhurried as she breathes in the cool, fragrant air. She pauses beside a small pool, watching the reflection of stars ripple gently as a breeze passes, and smiles softly at the quiet beauty of the moment. On a high balcony overlooking the vast expanse of clouds below, Zeus and Hera stand side by side, their figures silhouetted against the deep indigo sky. Their hands find each other's in a simple touch, a silent vow exchanged beneath the watchful eyes of the cosmos. No thunder rumbles in the distance. No commands echo from their lips. Instead, they share a moment of profound stillness, the weight of eternity resting lightly between them. Across the palace halls, Hestia tends the hearth with tender care, her fingers tracing the flame's gentle dance. The fire burns steadily, casting warm light that reaches into every corner, a quiet beacon of home and sanctuary amid the vast silence. Elsewhere, Hermes moves softly through shadowed corridors, his winged sandals carried delicately in one hand, his usual mischievous smile softened into a look of thoughtful calm. He pauses by a glowing lantern, watching the flickering flame cast long, gentle shadows that ripple along the walls like whispered memories. And so, as the night unfolds its quiet embrace over Mount Olympus, the gods rest not in sleep, but in presence, a shared breath held softly between stars and stone. The myths pause, the stories soften, and the eternal mountain hums a lullaby of peace, a sacred melody woven from the silence of immortality itself. As the night stretches deeper over Mount Olympus, the mountain is enveloped in a profound stillness that seems to hold every breath and whisper in gentle suspension. The vast celestial dome above is studded with countless stars, their light steady and soft, casting a silver veil over the gleaming marble terraces, ancient columns, and tranquil gardens where moonlight pools like liquid silk. In a quiet grove, sheltered by olive trees whose leaves shimmer faintly in the cool night air, Persephone sits alone on a moss-covered stone bench, her gaze lifted toward the infinite sky. The pomegranate she once carried now lies forgotten at her side, its power resting quietly, subdued by the serenity that fills her heart tonight. Her breath is slow and even, matching the rhythm of the night itself, as she listens to the faint rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of a hidden stream. Nearby, Demeter moves with gentle grace through the garden paths, her fingers lightly brushing the petals of night-blooming flowers. She carries no urgency or burden tonight, only the deep calm of a goddess who knows the cycles of life and rest alike. Her footsteps leave no sound upon the soft earth, and the scent of lavender and thyme follows softly in her wake, weaving a fragrant lullaby for the sleeping mountain. At the heart of Olympus, Within the serene embrace of the great hall, Hestia tends to a small but steady flame, its warm glow casting flickering shadows that dance softly along the polished stone floors. The fire is a quiet beacon, a constant presence that offers comfort and sanctuary without demand or spectacle. Around it, the altars lie bare, the incense unlit, as if the gods themselves have chosen this night to honor silence above all else. On a secluded balcony overlooking the vast expanse of clouds and stars, Zeus and Hera stand side by side in shared quietude. Their hands find each other's in a gentle grasp, a silent affirmation of eternal bond and unspoken understanding. No thunder breaks the silence, no decree disturbs the night. Instead, the king and queen of Olympus embrace the peace that comes from presence rather than power, from connection rather than command. Elsewhere, the Muses gather softly in shadowed chambers, their faces serene and their voices hushed into whispers that blend seamlessly with the night air. Calliope's fingers trace invisible patterns in the darkness, weaving tales of quiet inspiration that settle gently upon the hearts of those who listen. Terpsichore reclines with eyes closed, her breath steady, as the softest melodies arise, not from song but from the stillness itself. High above, Selene's silver chariot glides silently across the star-strewn sky, her gentle light bathing the mountain in a cool, soothing glow. The night flows through Olympus like a tender breath, carrying with it the sacred promise of rest, renewal, and the endless grace of simply being. And so, in this profound and sacred stillness, Mount Olympus does not sleep. It lives, breathes, and shines quietly beneath the watchful gaze of the stars, a sanctuary of peace woven from the very essence of eternity. As the night stretches toward its final hours, Mount Olympus remains cradled in a timeless hush, where every stone, every leaf, and every breath of wind is part of a silent symphony of peace. The sky above is a vast canvas of deep indigo, scattered, with stars whose soft light glimmers like distant promises whispered across eternity. The marble pillars of the grand palace stand silent and still, their surfaces bathed in the gentle silver glow of the moon, while the gardens below are cloaked in a shimmering veil of twilight mist that softens every shape and sound. In a secluded grove where ancient olive trees sway gently without a sound, Demeter rests beneath the branches, her hands folded calmly in her lap, eyes closed as she listens to the quiet pulse of the night. Nearby, Persephone sits by a reflective pool, her gaze steady and serene, the once vivid scarlet of the pomegranate now softened to a gentle blush, its power dormant but not forgotten. Her breath rises and falls with the rhythm of the stars, and for this moment, the weight of seasons and fate is lifted, replaced by a pure and abiding calm. Across the courtyard, Athena stands alone beneath the moonlit sky. Her shield and helmet, set aside as symbols of war and wisdom, take their rest. She gazes upward, her eyes tracing the constellations that shimmer like silent guides, and her expression is one of quiet contemplation, not of strategy or battle, but of presence and peace. Her owl perches nearby, vigilant yet still, a companion in this sacred vigil of night. In the deep corridors of the palace, Hermes moves softly, his steps light as whispers upon the marble floors. His winged sandals are carried in his hand, and his usual mischievous grin is softened into a thoughtful smile. He pauses beside a flickering lantern, watching the flame dance gently in the cool air, casting shifting shadows that ripple like memories along the walls. High above, Selene rides her silver chariot across the star-studded sky, her light weaving a delicate thread of luminescence that bathes the mountain in a tranquil glow. She moves with grace and calm, a silent guardian of the night's quiet beauty. Elsewhere, the Muses gather softly in shadowed chambers, their usual vibrant energy subdued into a gentle presence. Calliope traces patterns in the air, weaving invisible stories that shimmer and fade without sound, while Terpsichore leans against a column, eyes half closed, breathing in the stillness. And at the heart of Olympus, Hestia tends a small, steady flame, its warm glow a beacon of home and sanctuary amid the vast silence. No prayers are uttered, no offerings made. The flame burns simply to hold space, a constant presence in a world of change. As the night deepens and the stars wheel slowly overhead, Mount Olympus rests not in slumber but in presence, a sacred pause where myths soften, stories hush, and the eternal mountain breathes quietly beneath the watchful gaze of the cosmos, a sanctuary of peace woven from the very essence of stillness and being. As the final whispers of night stretch across Mount Olympus, the mountain rests in a profound stillness, its timeless stones glowing softly under the gentle caress of dawn's first light. The stars, now fading like distant dreams, retreat quietly behind the pale blush of morning, while the cool air holds a promise of renewal without haste or demand. Within the vast marble halls, the gods remain motionless, their forms softened by the tender glow that spills through open archways and delicate curtains swaying in a breathless breeze. Hestia's eternal flame burns low but steady, casting a warm embrace that seems to hold the very soul of Olympus in its gentle light. Nearby, Athena's armor lies untouched, her thoughtful gaze fixed not on battle or wisdom this morning, but on the soft dance of dust motes floating lazily through shafts of new sunlight. Persephone, freed from the shadows of the underworld, steps lightly among blooming gardens, her fingers trailing over petals still wet with morning dew, her smile quiet and full of promise. Zeus and Hera stand side by side atop the highest balcony, their silhouettes outlined against the awakening sky, sharing a moment of peaceful unity that needs no words. Hermes, freed from the weight of messages and mischief, slips quietly through corridors bathed in dawn's glow, his footsteps light and unhurried, carrying with him the calm of a world ready to begin anew. The Muses awaken slowly, their eyes opening to a day untouched by urgency, their voices poised to weave gentle tales of hope and wonder. Selene, the moon goddess, fades softly into the light, her silver chariot dissolving into the warm hues of morning, leaving behind only the memory of her luminous passage. And as Mount Olympus breathes in the promise of a new day, it carries with it the sacred lesson of night's embrace, that even the gods find strength in stillness, peace in presence, and renewal in the gentle unfolding of time. Here, at the close of this long and quiet journey, Olympus stands not as a realm of endless myth and thunderous power, but as a sanctuary where the deepest stories are those whispered in silence, and the greatest act is simply to be.